Chapter 783. After eating dumplings, the relationship between the girls in Jiang Hai's villa was brought closer. In the past, there was only one reason why these girls would live here, and that was because of Jiang Hai. Although it was still because of Jiang Hai, the relationship between these people had quietly improved. A woman's friendship was different from a man's. Between men, it was possible to see eye to eye. After a drink, they would become good friends. The four ironies in life were to carry guns together, go through windows together, share the loot together, and have girlfriends together. Cough. It was not to be said. Therefore, when men gathered together, they were true friends, regardless of social status. Of course, people's hearts were the most unpredictable. Maybe you don't care about your net worth, but your friends might care about it. However, if he really picked these things, it meant that he did not treat you as a true friend. Fortunately, the relationship between Jiang Hai's friends was quite good. No matter when Jiang Hai was good or bad, their relationship was still quite good. They were still in contact on WeChat. As for making friends between women, it was different from men. When they were together, they would show off. Look at my watch, my bag, my ring, my makeup products. In the end, it would be how capable my husband was. The friendship between women was torn apart. Just like Xiang Yu's words, if you don't return to your hometown when you're rich, it's like walking in the night with cotton clothes. They were basically in the state of Xiang Yu. Of course, there were some who were more indifferent. However, such people were very rare. It was difficult for Jiang Hai's women to form a friendship because they had nothing to tear apart. No matter what Jiang Hai did, he had to be fair. If he bought something for one person, everyone would have it. If the price was about the same, it was up to you. As long as you pointed it out, he would buy it. Therefore, although his women's clothes, bags, watches, jewelry, and makeup products were different, the price was about the same. How could they show off? If they showed off here and there, wouldn't their man be the same person? At this time, they had to consider the palace fights in the ancient times of Huaxia. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's people were not divided into ranks. They were all educated people, so naturally, they wouldn't feel that they were superior to others. Therefore, even though they couldn't fight each other, their relationship had never been particularly good. Especially Qi Jia, Chia, Feng Yunchen, and Ai Xiaoxi. These were the two biggest gangs. However, after eating dumplings, everyone's relationship became closer. This was something that Jiang Hai did not expect. While Qi Jia was teaching Taraga, Marian, and Delina, Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi would also go over to take a look. Qi Jia's grades were the highest here. She could open a research center on her own, which meant that she had at least a doctorate degree. However, she was still a little far from high school, while Ai Xiaoxi was much closer to it. Ai Xiaoxi could be admitted to a university in the capital. She was also a top student in their school. She scored more than 600 points in the college entrance examination. Although she was not the best in the country, she was definitely very good in her studies. Don't forget that Lu province was one of the most difficult provinces in the country. Ai Xiaoxi's learning level was not bad. Perhaps she might be a little worse in the things after college, but she could still remember the things from middle school and high school very well. With her joining them, Taraja and the others learned a little faster. However, it was impossible for them to learn all the things they had learned in the past few years before school started. They had to learn as much as they could. The holidays in American high schools were somewhat similar to those in China, but also somewhat different. In fact, since the founding of Huaxia, many things were learned from America. For example, driving, the steering wheel was on the left, and driving on the right. Students also had holidays. However, this holiday was somewhat similar, but also somewhat different. There were a total of 4 holidays in America. Among them, the winter holiday was quite fragmented. The Thanksgiving holiday was around a week, and the Christmas holiday was after the New Year. Therefore, their holidays were quite fragmented, and they did not pay much attention to the winter holiday. The summer holiday was a holiday that Americans paid much attention to. It started in June and lasted until September. It was a 3-month holiday. The new school year was also around this time. September 1st was the first day of school for this year's Winthrop High School. Jiang Hai also enrolled Taraga in this school year. As for Marian and Delina, they were still unwilling to go to school. Jiang Hai did not intend to force them to go to school, because he was a person who did not like to go to school. The women in the villa were working according to their schedule. Normally, Jiang Hai was really very free. Every morning, after having breakfast, he would walk around the manor. At around 10 o'clock, he would be free. He would lie down on the reclining chair and have lunch. In the afternoon, he would lie down outside and wait for dinner. After that, the day would pass. It was because he really had nothing to do. He remembered a saying in the past, those who take care of everything personally will eventually die of exhaustion. Just like the famous Zhuge Liang of the Three Kingdoms, he had to take care of everything and eventually died of exhaustion. Jiang Hai was famous for not doubting the people he used, and not using the people he doubted. He was not very good at fishing and herding, so he left it to the professionals. Jiang Hai spent so much money, and Edouard Anderson and Robbins Garcia were very attentive. Of course, some people would say that Jiang Hai did not care about these people. Wasn't he afraid that these people would make things difficult for him, or even bully him? Just like his good friends, their hearts were extremely dark. However, Jiang Hai did not care about this. Because for him, the existence of these people was not inevitable, and they were very clear about this. They knew that Jiang Hai's manor was popular because Jiang Hai had mastered the core technology, and it had nothing to do with them. If they did not do a good job, Jiang Hai could change a group of people, and it would be the same, but if they left, they would not be able to find such good jobs. They would not trade for hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year for a lawyer. But today, Jiang Hai, who was usually very lazy, was diligent for once. He got up early in the morning and walked around the manor. At 9 o'clock, he met up with Robbins Garcia and went to the home of Cotton Harris, the second largest manor owner in Winthrop. Today was the day that all the people on the ground at Jiang Hai had taken over were moving away. It was reasonable for Jiang Hai to send them off. So when they got up in the morning, the two of them drove the war shield that Jiang Hai had just sent back to Cotton Harris's home. When they arrived at Cotton Harris's home, they found that people were already there. For example, Old George, whom Jiang Hai was very familiar with, Carrie Clark, Sakri Eddy, whom Jiang Hai had once helped, and Cotton Harris and others. These people were all waiting for Jiang Hai. Seeing that Jiang Hai's car was parked, everyone got out of the car and said to Jiang Hai with a smile, "Jiang, you're finally here." Hearing their words, Jiang Hai also laughed and said, "Haha, I can't help it. This road is still very shabby. From today onwards, this place is all yours. You can take your time to fix it." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cotton Harris also laughed and said. The fact that Jiang Hai was very lazy was not a secret in Winthrop. Almost everyone knew that. Generally speaking, fishermen and cowboys were hard-working people. But Jiang Hai made it very comfortable. Not only was there an artificial river in the manor, but there were also tree-lined paths. At night, there were street lights. This year, a roof was directly built on the grass. If it rained, the cowboys could even go to the corridor to rest. The fisherman's wharf also had a lot of huts, but those huts, to be honest, were much better than the workers' houses. Although there was no way to compare with the small villa that Jiang Hai had allocated, it was still a place that other fishermen envied. So, spending money like Jiang Hai was their wish. "Don't worry, I will treat your pasture well." After exchanging a few pleasantries, Jiang Hai also said to them solemnly. To be honest, after these pasture lands were in his hands, Jiang Hai was not in a hurry to transform them immediately. Instead, he was going to remove all the grass and plant new grass seeds. At that time, all of them would be planted with alfalfa and emperor bamboo grass, and some Chinese medicinal herbs in the middle. Then, he would nourish them with his aura. At that time, the grass growing on these pasture lands would become the existence that witnessed miracles. Do whatever you want. If you need any help, just let us know. We are not far from you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the people here laughed and said. Jiang Hai had spent a lot of money to buy their pasture lands. Of course, Jiang Hai was not a spendthrift. It was because he really did not lack money. He also did not care about this small amount of money. These pastures were something he had to buy. And after these manor owners received the money, most of them did not choose to go to the city to enjoy themselves. Instead, they directly bought a piece of land south of Winthrop and resumed their previous business. After spending the money that Jiang Hai had spent, about 3/4 of the money was used to buy an identical manor. There was still a quarter left, which was very suitable. Because of these people's actions, the land price in Winthrop increased by about 5%. But for the people in Winthrop, this did not matter. First, it was because Americans did not have the habit of buying. They preferred to rent houses, especially some middle-aged people and young people. Second, it was because they were now rich people. But this increase in land price was a very troublesome thing for some Huaxia people, because they were also here to buy land. Chapter 784. The Chinese people's obsession with land should be the most famous in the world. Even the establishment of the current dynasty had an inseparable relationship with the word land division. Everyone knew that the Chinese people liked land and wanted to have more children. This could be seen in the United States. However, in Huaxia, because of some government regulations, children at Jiang Hai's age were basically only children. Of course, now the second-child policy was opened, giving newlyweds more opportunities. Although Jiang Hai was not like the older generation who had a strong obsession with land, he still liked the idea of having a lot of land. After having a meal with Cotton Harris and the others as a farewell, Jiang Hai found people to prepare his new territory the next day. Jiang Hai's manor originally had a land area of 11,200 acres, including 9,200 acres of grassland, 1,000 acres of vineyards, and more than 1,000 acres of forest. 1 acre was equal to 6 acres, which was 4,046 square meters, or 0.004 square kilometers. Jiang Hai's original manor had a land area of 10 square kilometers. How big was it? This was because Jiang Hai's manor was relatively long and narrow. From the map, the width was about 2 kilometers, nearly 3 kilometers, and the length was about 4 kilometers. If one were to calculate according to the domestic city's public transport, from one end of Jiang Hai's manor to the other, there were about 8 stops. If one were to drive at 40 kilometers per hour, it would take 10 minutes. This time, Jiang Hai bought 2 large pieces of land. Among them, the first batch of land that Old George sold to Jiang Hai was 8,640 acres. The land that Cotton Harris sold was 6,700 acres. In total, it was about 15,540 acres. Of course, it would only be more than this number, not less. This was because in the middle of the 2 ranches, in order to avoid any accidents, there would be a public area. But now, this area belonged to Jiang Hai. The land area of Jiang Hai's manor was about 27,800 acres. According to the calculation of 0.004 square kilometers per acre, Jiang Hai's manor was 111.2 square kilometers in total. According to the map, it was about 5 kilometers wide and more than 20 kilometers long. There were 40 bus stops. If one drove at 40 miles per hour, it would take half an hour to go from one side of Jiang Hai's manor to the other side. Almost half of the land outside Winthrop belonged to Jiang Hai. After passing Jiang Hai's manor and walking for more than 10 kilometers, it would be another area. So, this large area was Jiang Hai's territory. If Jiang Hai wanted to walk from one end to the other, it would probably take him at least 2 hours. The next day after these people moved away, Jiang Hai began to work on this piece of land. Although the grass was not in a hurry, other things still had to be done. For example, fences, alarm systems, monitoring systems, underground water veins, and so on. These had to be done well. So, Jiang Hai still found the construction team in Winthrop and handed the work to them. Of course, although they had a good relationship, if they did not do well, Jiang Hai would not let them have an easy time. They knew this and were very careful when they were doing it. The huge fences were because of the Americans. According to Jiang Hai's words, if it was in China, he would have built a fence. He would have put up a barbed wire fence and put some broken glass on the wall. This was better than any other protection. But the Americans could not do it. The Americans built walls. This made them feel restricted. It was like a prison. So, in the United States, even if it was a prison, many of the prison walls were made of barbed wire instead of walls. So, Jiang Hai still had to spend money to build a fence made of barbed wire. Of course, Jiang Hai also made the fence very high. It was at least 3 meters high. The higher the fence, the safer he felt. Then, he connected electricity to it and set off alarms. Other than that, there was good news about the underground water veins. Because Winthrop had an abundance of underground water, they did not lack water here. Originally, every ranch on this piece of land had its own independent water supply system. Jiang Hai only needed to spend a small amount of money to connect them together. These things cost a total of more than 3 million yuan. Naturally, Jiang Hai couldn't be stingy with this small amount of money. After all, he had already spent tens of millions. As for the original cowshed, houses, and the like, Jiang Hai picked a few good houses and kept them. Now that his family's business was getting bigger and bigger, he might be able to arrange some workers in the future. When that time comes, these villas would become workers' houses. As for the cowshed, stables, and the rest of the houses, Jiang Hai tore them down. Jiang Hai wanted to sell the grass on this piece of land, not for living. As for the clean grass, he would have to wait. In autumn, when the grass turned yellow, he would burn the entire land. Then, he would dig out the grass roots and wait for spring to replant the grass seeds. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, the grass would grow again around the year after next. But Jiang Hai was not worried. He would not do anything risky anyway. He would not make any risky investments. He would spend as much money as he had. He could afford to wait. Arranging work was a very easy thing. Jiang Hai spent 3 days to arrange his work. After that, he started his life as a cripple again. Every day, he would lie down on his jade recliner. This feeling was great. But as the male lead, Jiang Hai could not be paralyzed all day. Even if he did not go out looking for trouble, trouble would come looking for him. For example, today. Early in the morning, Mayor Worth called Jiang Hai in Winthrop and told him that he would come over in the morning with a few guests. These guests wanted to discuss a business deal with Jiang Hai. He was just the middleman. Jiang Hai did not care much about what Mayor Wallace said. After all, it was a business deal, and Jiang Hai did not need any business at the moment. But since it was Mayor Wallace, he couldn't not give face to him, so he still agreed. After finishing his daily chores in the morning, he lay down on his recliner outside. Around 10 o'clock, 2 cars appeared outside the gate of Jiang Hai's house. Because they had already informed the others that Mayor Wallace would be coming today, the women also knew. When they saw that it was Mayor Wallace's car, they let it pass. Mayor Wallace and the other car came to the parking lot in front of Jiang Hai's villa. As the 2 cars stopped, a group of 8 people also got out of the cars. What surprised Jiang Hai was that except for Mayor Wallace, the other 7 people were all Chinese. 2 of them had obvious leadership qualities. They walked with bulging stomachs, and their belts were tied up very high. There were so many people following them, and someone was even helping them carry teacups. As soon as they got out of the car, they looked like they were giving orders. To be honest, people like Jiang Hai were naturally not interested in officials and rich people. It might be because of his previous jealousy. Therefore, his first impression of these people was not very good. However, they were guests, so he could not continue to be paralyzed here. He sat up forcefully and then walked to these people in front of him. It's really beautiful here. As he walked closer, Jiang Hai also heard these people commenting on Jiang Hai's house. Although Jiang Hai's villa looked a bit out of place, it was still a product of the combination of Chinese and Western. Therefore, for some postmodern people, especially those who liked the Western Huaxia style, it was quite unique. Just like Qi Jia, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan felt strange when they saw Jiang Hai's house for the first time, but Qi Jia felt that it was very beautiful. Now, many of these people also felt that it was very beautiful. Jiang Hai was used to it, so it did not matter. Seeing Jiang Hai walk over, several people here stopped talking and looked at the two leaders and Mayor Wallace who walked forward. Jiang, let me introduce you. These two are leaders from Huaxia. This is Lu, Director Lu of XX Unit. This is Li, Deputy Director Li. It was not that Mayor Wallace did not know how to introduce people. In China, if it was introduced, naturally, the word deputy would be directly removed. However, in the United States, the words director and deputy director were different. In general, the most senior personnel used the word head, which meant leader. Deputy director used the word vice director, so it was easy to distinguish them. It was impossible to be subtle because they were different words. Fortunately, Deputy Director Li did not care about this. After hearing Mayor Wallace's introduction, he took the initiative to reach out his hand, took the hand that Jiang Hai had already shaken with Director Lu, and shook it enthusiastically. This is not the first time we have come to Winthrop. Brother Zhang's name is like thunder to our ears, but this is the first time we have met. We are loyal fans of your seafood. Looking at Jiang Hai, Deputy Director Li said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and then led everyone into the villa. At this time, in the villa, because they already knew that there would be people coming, Chia and the others were already prepared. Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan stayed on the first floor with Aphrodite and Hilda. The other girls were either on the second floor or went to work. As soon as they saw everyone come in, the few women who were sitting on the sofa also stood up. When these people saw Feng Yunshan and the others, their eyes could not help but light up. Who doesn't love beautiful women? Especially the young people who followed them. For a moment, their eyes could not help but light up. Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi were called goddesses in China, and Aphrodite and Hilda were also quite good-looking. No wonder these guys had eyes. But fortunately, they knew that this was someone else's territory. Although they were very beautiful, they did not stare. However, he did not stare. Instead, after a glance, he found a spot and watched quietly. Chapter 785. Come and sit down. Tea or drink? Wine? The things I have here should be quite complete. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled. He was not the kind of person who would dig out other people's eyes just because they looked at his woman, but he was definitely not willing to look at her lecherously. Fortunately, these people knew how to restrain themselves, so Jiang Hai just said a few words and then sat down at the head of a table that had been prepared long ago. Seeing Jiang Hai sitting there, the team members who followed here couldn't help but be speechless. Then they seemed to remember that they were not in China, so they sat down casually. As for Chief Lu and Chief Li, they didn't say anything. Just like these subordinates, they realized that they were not in China. Jiang Hai didn't need to be polite to them. How could they not realize it? No matter how well they educated their children, it was rare to see a domineering and arrogant aura from them. Their generation was all about making money quietly, and they didn't care about guns. So they didn't show anything on their faces at this time, and they sat casually at the table. After everyone had sat down, Jiang Hai asked the people in front of him. I drove today. Damn it, it's not easy to get a chance to get wine from you. Forget it, give me a cup of tea. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but slap his forehead and said with a face of annoyance. Since winning the award, the specialties of Jiang Hai's manner changed from seafood and beef to seafood, beef, and red wine. Especially the beef stewed with red wine. Wow, it was simply 1 plus 1 equals 2. It was at least equal to 4, 5, or 6. Mayor Wallace used to be a clerk, so he was not a cowboy or a fisherman. He didn't like to drink wine that was too strong. After drinking Jiang Hai's red wine once, he couldn't forget it. Of course, he also knew that Jiang Hai's wine was for sale, so he didn't come to ask Jiang Hai for wine. As for buying, he also knew very well that he couldn't afford it, so he came over at most for a while. Oh. Is Brother Zhang's wine very good? We really haven't heard of it, we just know that your beef and seafood here are excellent. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Director Li also spoke with a smile. This bureau chief Lu was sent down by the higher-ups. Usually, he didn't care much about things. He was the so-called chief in charge of the general direction. Deputy Director Li, on the other hand, had started from the bottom. This time, they had come to talk to Jiang Hai. Of course, it was impossible to simply hand over the translation authority to the translator. Among the 7 of them, 6 of them were quite good at English. Only Director Lu's level was not good. 4 of them could communicate with foreigners fluently. Just now, although Mayor Wallace spoke quickly, they still heard it clearly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled gently. My wine, I have no proof. Bring me a bottle. Hearing what Deputy Director Li said, Jiang Hai smiled. He wasn't showing off. Well, in fact, he was showing off. Anyway, these people can't find trouble with him. After saying something to Aphrodite next to him, Aphrodite went to the cold storage next to him and took out a bottle of red wine. Hilda also prepared some goblets for wine tasting, but when she handed out the goblets, 3 people refused. One was Mayor Wallace, another was the driver of the 7 people, and the last one was Director Lu. I'm not used to drinking red wine. I just heard little Jiang say that there is tea. I don't know if you can make me a cup of tea. Director Lu smiled shyly and pushed away the goblet handed by Hilda and said to Jiang Hai. Of course, there's no problem. I usually drink tea. Hearing Director Lu's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, then nodded to Aphrodite. Aphrodite took the kettle that had already boiled, then took out some tea leaves from the cabinet and put some into the teacups that Jiang Hai and Director Lu brought. This fragrance. Is this Longjing? Looking at the appearance of the tea leaves and the fragrance of the tea, Director Lu was stunned for a moment. Then, he sniffed carefully, and a trace of doubt flashed on his face. Because this is indeed Longjing, he can smell it, but this quality. Just by smelling it, he can feel that this tea is already more fragrant than the best Longjing sold on the market. What's going on? Good eyesight, Director Lu, try it. After Jiang Hai said with a smile, he motioned for Aphrodite to pour the water. The water Jiang Hai's was not ordinary water. The underground water in Winthrop was extremely rich. Jiang Hai's water was specially obtained from a spring. This spring was not big, and the source of the spring water was the Alabama mountain range. In other words, this was an authentic underground mountain spring water. When it was first drawn up, it was bone-chilling, even in summer. When it was first boiled, it had to be filtered, and the second time the water was boiled again before it was used to make tea. And his tea leaves were not ordinary either. They were picked from the tea leaves that he got from China. There was only a little this year, but fortunately, it was enough for Jiang Hai to drink, and it was enough for him to show off. The hot water was poured into the teacup, and in an instant, a strong bean fragrance floated out of the teacup. At this time, Deputy Director Li and some other people who were waiting to sober up, couldn't help but have their eyes lit up. There were very few people in the system who didn't like tea, because as the saying goes, if the superiors liked it, the subordinates would follow suit. In order to have more common topics with the superiors, if the superiors liked tea, the subordinates would also like tea. In addition, it hadn't been long since Huaxia was founded, and the first generation of leaders didn't have any drinks to drink. They could only drink tea, so this tradition was slowly passed down. Now, among the 7 people, 4 new tea. Can I also try the tea leaves? At this time, Deputy Director Li asked with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also motioned for him to go ahead. After Deputy Director Li took the tea leaves, 2 people whispered to Aphrodite and asked for tea leaves. The first brew of the tea is not to drink. This is called tea washing. First, it is to wash off the dust on the tea leaves, and second, it is to make the tea leaves stretch out and show a better tea shape in the cup. Jiang Hai didn't know this at first, it was all taught by his grandfather Zhang Dihai. After the first brew, everyone began to drink the second brew. Jiang Hai didn't care, but Director Li's eyes lit up the moment he took a sip. This tea is good water, good tea, and has a trace of spirituality. When the tea entered the mouth, it carried a strong fragrance. The fragrance overflowed, and it also carried the unique non-bitter taste of Longjing tea. After the tea was swallowed, there was a strong aftertaste. At the same time, the tea carried spiritual energy. As soon as it entered the body, it would act on its own. Although it didn't have any damn effect, it would make people feel refreshed. At the same time, they would feel the cold air in their body rush out in an instant, making people feel particularly energetic. This tea. Good tea. After a long while, Deputy Director Li and the other 2 people who came with him let out a long breath. Then, Deputy Director Li said with a face full of emotion. He knew that Americans didn't like tea, so before he came, he had already thought that there wouldn't be any good tea. But now, after drinking it, he knew that he was wrong, very wrong. These tea leaves are too good. The quality of this tea is comparable to the tribute, and it even has a bit more spirituality than the tribute. Little Zhang's tea leaves are the best. At this time, Director Lu also slowly opened his eyes and said with a face full of emotion. When he said this, everyone became silent. This was because everyone knew that Bureau Chief Lu was sent down by the higher-ups to deal with the top issues in the country. If he said that Jiang Hai could be compared to the tribute tea, then it could be compared to the tribute tea. At this time, when they looked at Jiang Hai, they couldn't help but feel a little emotional. It was really terrifying. Jiang Hai really had everything here. Hey, it's just some of my tea trees. The wine is almost sober. Come and try my red wine. I'm not used to drinking it. I still like to drink beer, but foreigners who have drunk this thing say that it's good. You guys should try it too. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled. He glanced at the wine that was almost sober and said to everyone. At this time, Hilda also came over with the wine and poured half a glass for each of them. It was not that Jiang Hai was stingy, but it was red wine. She only poured half a glass. In China, the rule of half a glass of tea for a full glass of wine was not applicable here. When these people who knew wine took a sip of Jiang Hai's red wine, their eyes lit up again. These people in the system naturally participated in all kinds of banquets. Red wine, white wine, beer, yellow wine, and foreign wine. It could be said that they had drunk all kinds of wines sold in the market. But now, when they drank Jiang Hai's wine, their eyes almost popped out. This wine was too good. After tasting it carefully, not to mention anything else, it was definitely better than all the red wine in the country. Compared to the top foreign wine, it could be described with 4 words. They really couldn't imagine how Jiang Hai could have so many good things here. With tea and wine, Jiang Hai and these people were closer, but at the same time, they also knew that Jiang Hai's good things were not as simple as they seemed on the surface. I don't know why you came back to see me. After tasting the tea and wine, and sitting for a while, Jiang Hai didn't have time to accompany these guys here, so he took the initiative to ask. If they didn't say anything, then Jiang Hai could only ask himself. Little Jiang, a straightforward person doesn't speak in riddles. This time, we came here mainly to buy land from you. Looking at Jiang Hai, Director Li hesitated for a moment and said to Jiang Hai, but as soon as his voice fell, Jiang Hai frowned. Chapter 786. Hearing Director Lu's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but frown deeply. This was because everyone knew that Jiang Hai's land would not be sold. Although Jiang Hai wasn't as obsessed with land as the older generation in China, the land he bought wasn't for farming or playing, but to make money. His manor made $2 billion a year from selling cattle, and the other manors made almost $2 billion a year from selling grass. That was $4 billion a year. Now someone came to him and said that they wanted to buy his land? Was he crazy? Sorry, I don't plan to sell the land. He shook his head directly. This wasn't China. If the country came and said that they wanted to expropriate your land, it would be useless to say anything because the land belonged to the country, it was just rented to you. But this was the United States, and this land was bought by Jiang Hai, so he definitely wouldn't sell it. $4 billion a year, that was $40 billion in 10 years. Was he crazy to sell this thing? Don't be in a hurry to refuse. It's just a piece of land, it doesn't have any special meaning. We will definitely give you a satisfactory answer. Why don't you take a look at the price first? Hearing Jiang Hai directly refuse him, Deputy Director Li smiled and then said to Jiang Hai. Then he took out a piece of paper from his briefcase. It was clearly written on the paper that they wanted to buy Jiang Hai's land, and they were prepared to take out $1 billion. Are you robbing me? Looking at the words on the paper, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Did they do any work? Want to buy my land for $1 billion? Their brains must be flooded with water. Little Jiang, how can you say that? $1 billion is the price estimated by our experts. That's a lot. You bought this land for $280 million, including the sea field. We don't want the sea field, we only want the land. Including the land you bought this time, the land here is worth at most $300 million. $1 billion is already quite a ridiculous price. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Deputy Director Li smiled and said to him. Since you're here, you should know that my cattle can be sold for $2 billion a year. My grass can be sold for several $100 million a year. Now that my manor has been expanded, my grass can be sold for $2 billion a year. That's more than $4 billion a year, $5 billion a year. Even if you deduct taxes, I still have $3 billion in income, and that's just for 1 year. But you want to spend $1 billion to buy my manor? I can only say that you're thinking too much. Jiang Hai shook his head as he spoke in a very flat tone. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, many people sitting here couldn't help but gasp. In fact, it wasn't the first time that the people sitting here came to Winthrop. To be precise, those who came to Winthrop for the first time were from the Bureau, but those who came here were not high-ranking officials. At that time, they knew that Jiang Hai was rich. Later, the Bureau organized a few more trips here, and then some people with economic brains saw the advantages of Winthrop. It was very close to Boston and not far from New York, and the things here were very good. It could be said that this was a good place for domestic tourism and vacations. So they thought for a while and decided to buy a piece of land here and build a resort. The best choice was Jiang Hai's manor. Jiang Hai's manor was big enough and had abundant water resources. Most importantly, the basic equipment was almost ready. As long as they took over, it wouldn't take long for them to open for business. So they found Mayor Wallace and wanted to talk about buying Jiang Hai's manor. Although Mayor Wallace knew that Jiang Hai would never sell his manor, he also didn't dare to offend the Bureau in the country, so he could only act as a bridge. As for whether Jiang Hai would sell it or not, it was still up to him. But when Mayor Wallace heard that this person was only going to buy Jiang Hai's manor for $1 billion, he knew that this deal was over. After these people heard Jiang Hai's words, they couldn't help but look at each other. They knew that Jiang Hai was rich, but they didn't expect Jiang Hai to be so rich. An income of $5 billion a year. God, what the hell is this? According to Jiang Hai, he would be the richest man in the world in a few years? Thinking of this, they couldn't help but look at each other. They clearly saw a trace of disbelief in each other's eyes. They thought that Jiang Hai was just talking nonsense. He wanted to raise the price. How about this, we'll add 200 million, 2 billion, what do you think? If it's really as you said, selling cattle and grass can sell for so much money, 2 billion can buy a bigger manor, and then your income will be more, right? Looking at Jiang Hai, Deputy Director Li hesitated for a moment, then added 200 million to Jiang Hai. You don't believe me. It seems like you don't believe me. Let's not talk about 5 billion or 4 billion first. Last year, I sold cattle for 1.5 billion US dollars. I paid taxes, so if you want to check, you can easily find out. This year, not only did I sell cattle, but I also sold fish and grass. Not to mention other things, I can still earn 2 billion US dollars. When the time comes, besides the taxes, I can also earn 2 billion US dollars. In other words, your 2 billion US dollars is only enough for me to earn for a year. Do you think I will sell my foundation for a year's worth of money? Looking at the crowd in front of him, Jiang Hai shook his head and said indifferently. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the faces of the people here were a little ugly. They originally thought that this should be a sure thing, but they didn't expect Jiang Hai's foundation to be so solid. An income of more than $1 billion a year. God, the people here may not be able to earn $100 million in their lifetime. Of course, this refers to the ordinary employees. As for the rest. It's not something Jiang Hai can comment on, but he certainly won't sell this place. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the people here looked at each other. According to what Jiang Hai said now, he can make more than $1 billion a year, and that's after taxes. If they really want to buy it, they will have to pay at least a decade's price. More than 10 billion? How is this possible? It's absolutely impossible for them to spend more than $10 billion to buy Jiang Hai's manor. And most importantly, they are only taking over the manor to open a holiday village. How many years will it take for them to earn that much money? So after Director Lu and Deputy Director Li looked at each other, they both shook their heads. We really didn't expect little Jiang to make so much money here. We came abruptly, but little Jiang, have you ever considered getting involved in the real estate project? Looking at Jiang Hai, Deputy Director Li also took back his somewhat embarrassing proposal. What a joke, an acquisition proposal worth $10 billion was not something they could decide. But although they couldn't buy Jiang Hai's land, they could consider cooperating with Jiang Hai to develop real estate. Real estate? Hearing the three sons, the first person Jiang Hai thought of was the current richest man in Huaxia. This was because he started out in real estate. When Jiang Hai was a farmer, he looked down on those who started out in real estate. But when he became a rich person, he didn't have much hostility towards those who started out in real estate. Now hearing Deputy Director Li's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, then shook his head gently. This is a bit unrealistic. You know, this is the United States. Even if we build a house here, can we sell it? Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Anyway, if it was him, if his roots were in Huaxia, he would never buy a house in the United States. Of course, it was possible to buy a house. Many people in Huaxia had real estate in the United States. The United States was still very relaxed when it came to buying a house, unlike China, where there was a need for a household registration, identification, and so on. Here, one could just sign a purchase and sale agreement. It was as simple as renting a house. Of course, the premise was that one had enough money and time. Our houses are mainly targeted at Huaxia tourists. You know, people in Huaxia are the least short of money recently, and the houses we sell here may not be more expensive than those in some cities in China. After all, the land price here is right there. Originally, our idea was to buy your place, build a resort on the seaside and your current grassland, and then build several residential areas in other areas, high-rise or villa communities. But now, it seems that we can't buy it. However, there is still some land in Winthrop. We represent the country, so it's not very good to invest money to build land here. But you can, so we can cooperate. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, Deputy Director Li chuckled, then said very seriously. He was very sincere and also telling the truth. If they built a residential area in Winthrop, they could sell it for $1,000 per square meter, which was more than 6,000 yuan, and they could earn it back. What's more, they couldn't sell it for $1,000, at least 10,000 yuan per square meter. This was the average house price in some first-tier cities in China. In the city center, it was easy to sell for 20,000 or 30,000 yuan, but in places like Hang City, Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Beijing. What a joke! In Beijing, the second ring road was a good place. How could you buy it for less than 100,000 yuan per square meter? Of course, he was talking about RMB. But in Winthrop, it was $2,000 per square meter, 12,000 yuan per square meter. You can rest and play here, and if your child is studying in Boston, you can come over to accompany him. It was really a good place. Chapter 787. Director Liu and Deputy Director Li didn't have lunch at Jiang Hai's place. After talking to Jiang Hai, they left. They would have to listen to Jiang Hai's opinion on what to do. After they left, Jiang Hai also fell into contemplation. Sitting under the big tree at the door, he kept thinking about what Bureau Chief Liu and Deputy Bureau Chief Li said to him today, about whether or not to invest in real estate. According to what they said, Jiang Hai would make a lot of money if he got into real estate. In fact, Jiang Hai had a rough idea of how much money he could make. Building a high-rise building with 20 or 30 floors would cost $30 to $40 million. Including the cost of acquiring the land, one building would cost $20 million, which would add up to about $50 million. But in a building, there would be 2 households per floor, and each household would average 120 square meters. There would be 4 entrances to each building, and 30 floors would mean 240 households. $2,000 per square meter, which would be $1.44 million per house. 240 households would mean $345.6 million. Why was real estate so valuable? That was why it was so valuable. Even if they increased the investment and spent 100 million to build a building, even if the quality was so good that it made people's hair stand on end, they would still earn 200 million after the construction. Of course, this money would not all go to the developers. The government officials would definitely get some of the money as well. But if Jiang Hai took the lead here, he would approve the land here, then let the local people come over to build it, and then sell it to the rich people in the country. Jiang Hai would get at least half of the profits, which would be $100 million. After deducting the taxes, Jiang Hai would make about $10 million per house. Naturally, there couldn't be only one building in a community. If they built 20 or 30 buildings, they would make $200 or $300 million. To be honest, he would be lying if he said he wasn't tempted by the money. More importantly, if the community was built, it would attract more people to settle down in Winthrop. In that case, the people who came to buy things wouldn't just be tourists, but ordinary household expenses. This would greatly increase Winthrop's expenses. Not only would the sales of furniture, decorations, and clothes increase greatly. He finally understood why Mayor Wallace didn't lure them here even though he knew Jiang Hai wouldn't sell the land. Firstly, it was because he didn't want to offend these rich people. Secondly, it would be beneficial for them if the community was built. To be honest, Jiang Hai would be lying if he said he wasn't tempted by the hundreds of millions of dollars in business. Although he made a lot of money in a year, the problem was that it would be beneficial for him, the other party, and Winthrop. But vaguely, Jiang Hai felt that something was wrong, which was why he was so conflicted. Fortunately, Chief Liu and the others knew that this matter couldn't be rushed, so they let Jiang Hai think about it carefully. After a simple lunch, Jiang Hai continued to lie on the recliner and think. But to be honest, he was really conflicted and didn't know what to do. Unknowingly, the sky gradually darkened. After dinner, Jiang Hai and the others went back to rest. Tonight, the ones in charge of accompanying Jiang Hai were Chia, Qijia, Sheila, and Ohelia. Recently, Jiang Hai and the others had gotten used to the rotation system. From Sunday to Friday, they changed people every day. On Sunday, Valentina and the others came back and occupied Jiang Hai's time. Of course, during the day, it was different. Usually, Jiang Hai was quite concerned about these things. After all, a dragon's nature was quite good. So whenever a woman teased him, Jiang Hai always couldn't control his primitive power. But today, Jiang Hai seemed to have something on his mind. After dealing with Qijia, Jiang Hai also dealt with Sheila and Ohelia. When they fell asleep, Jiang Hai and Qijia were still fighting. Perhaps sensing that something was wrong with Jiang Hai, Qijia, who was straddling Jiang Hai, couldn't help but let the battle continue. At the same time, she patted Jiang Hai's chest. "Why are you acting so weird today? You seemed absent-minded when you were doing this." Looking at Jiang Hai, Qijia asked with some doubts. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also returned to his senses temporarily and looked at her apologetically. "I'm always thinking about other things. What those two said to me when they left today made me hesitate." Touching Qijia's ankle with both hands, Jiang Hai thought for a while. He couldn't figure it out by himself, so it was better to ask someone else. "What's there to hesitate about? Do you want to enter this industry?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qijia couldn't help but stop. She wiped the sweat on her forehead, then looked at Jiang Hai strangely and asked. "Well, it's not that I can't join, because it's really profitable. I did some calculations this afternoon. Even if the quality of the buildings is the best, I can still make more than 100 million yuan per building, which is 3 billion yuan per building. After converting it to US dollars and including taxes, I can still make about 300 million yuan per building. It should be a profitable business, but I still feel that something is wrong." Hearing Qijia's words, Jiang Hai looked at her with his posture. Indeed, Jiang Hai really didn't understand. Such a profitable business, why don't they do it themselves and let you do it? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qijia also looked at him and asked with some confusion. According to Jiang Hai, they can still make so much money with the best quality. If the quality only meets the requirements, they can make at least 50% more. Such a good business, why don't they do it themselves and let Jiang Hai do it? This made her a little confused. Because this is the United States. If the government of Huaxia comes and says that we want to buy a piece of land and build a community here, the government of the United States will definitely not agree. You know, the government of the United States is very particular about the sovereignty of land. If the government of Huaxia buys a piece of land here, it will definitely be a problem whether the land belongs to Huaxia or the United States. Hearing Qijia's words, Jiang Hai also understood why these people wanted him to make money. It was because of Jiang Hai's connections in Massachusetts. It was because Jiang Hai could dig out land from the hands of the United States government. This was the reason why they joined him. You also know that this is the United States. Have you thought about it? If you buy land and build a building here, if anything goes wrong, will you be the person that the government of the United States will look for? You can't have forgotten that you have a manor here, right? Why do you want to let your manor be threatened for a business deal of $300 million? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qijia sat on his lap and asked him curiously. Hearing Qijia's words, Jiang Hai instantly felt that there was something wrong in his mind. He immediately figured it out. Yes, he only cared about the benefits, but didn't see the threat behind the benefits. The current relationship between Huaxia and the United States, there was no way to talk about it here. If Huaxia used this place to do something to the United States government, then Jiang Hai, the person who bought the land, would bear the brunt of it. Now, Jiang Hai was living well here. First, he paid taxes well, and second, he didn't have any weaknesses that could be used against him. In this world, money was the most important thing. One was Walmart, and the other was the royal family of Du Feimin. Although these were Jiang Hai's protection, Jiang Hai didn't believe that no one was interested in his manor. Now, Jiang Hai didn't have a tail, so they couldn't catch Jiang Hai's problem. But once Jiang Hai had any weaknesses that could be used against him in the hands of those in power in the United States, then his money and his foundation would be destroyed. Jiang Hai wasn't the kind of person who would sacrifice himself for the country. Perhaps some people would say that he didn't have the right values. Without the country, there wouldn't be a home. Without a home, there wouldn't be him. Everything he had belonged to the country. It was only right that he shed his blood for the country. But now, Jiang Hai didn't just have to think about himself. His family also had to think about. If there was an accident and his whole family died, who could he reason with? $300 million wasn't a small amount, but for Jiang Hai, it wasn't indispensable. Once he thought this through, Jiang Hai understood. I was almost trapped. You're still the best. You saw through it with one glance. Jiang Hai said with a smile as he patted Qi Jie's butt. Then, he picked her up, put her on the bed, and began to attack her. This heart disease was finally cured. He also had to thank Qi Jie properly. And in Jiang Hai's gratitude, Qi Jie quickly reached an indescribable state. At this time, Jiang Hai also let out a long breath and then stopped. You really didn't give me any time to prepare. Yi gave Jiang Hai a strange look. Qi Jie patted his arm. In fact, Qi Jie was quite happy that Jiang Hai would listen to her. At least, Jiang Hai was the type to listen to advice. Hey, you're all sweaty. Let's go take a shower together. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also said to her with a smile. No, this thing stays in the body. The chances of pregnancy are higher. You don't want a baby. Glancing at Jiang Hai, Qi Jie lazily prepared to go to sleep, but Jiang Hai directly picked her up. What's the hurry? I'll get you a new one. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jie couldn't help but blush and pat his back. This guy is really in a hurry. That night, Qi Jie didn't know when she fell asleep. She just vaguely felt that when she fell asleep, the sky seemed to be almost bright. As for Jiang Hai, he also thanked her properly. Early the next morning, after Jiang Hai got up, he called Deputy Director Li and rejected his proposal. Just as Qi Jie said, Jiang Hai didn't lack money. Contentment is a long way to go. He didn't want to earn that 300 million. Chapter 788. Hello, it's me. Ah. That's a pity. If we have a chance in the future, we must cooperate again. Okay. Goodbye. With that last sentence, Deputy Director Li hung up the phone. Then he looked at Director Liu, who was sitting in the distance drinking tea, and walked over helplessly. What? He didn't agree? Seeing Deputy Director Li coming over, Director Liu took a sip of tea, and then said with an intoxicated face. He got this tea from Jiang Hai. When he left yesterday, Jiang Hai gave him 0.5 kilogram. It was extremely precious to him. Usually, with his rank, he could only get 2 or 3 grams of this level of tea. Of course, there were less than 20 people in the country who could afford to drink freely. Yes, he didn't agree. Hearing Director Liu's words, Deputy Director Li shrugged helplessly. Actually, this is understandable. If it were me, I wouldn't agree either. Hearing Deputy Director Li's words, Director Liu put down the cup and said with a chuckle. In fact, from the beginning, when he knew that Jiang Hai could make billions a year, he was quite unconfident about his mission. Although he couldn't speak English, he wasn't stupid. Yes, in fact, from the beginning, it was those guys in the country who made a mistake. They wanted to trap Jiang Hai with a profit of $300 million. As long as Jiang Hai understood some of the twists and turns in it, he wouldn't have agreed. Hearing Director Liu's words, Deputy Director Li sighed. Sometimes, the people at the top thought too simply of things. Forget it. We have already done our best and left it up to fate. Whatever happens next has nothing to do with us. It was Jiang Hai who rejected us. Let's have fun for a few days and go back to report. In fact, from the beginning, these people didn't expect to reach an agreement. The first thing was to buy Jiang Hai's manor with $1.2 billion. Jiang Hai must be crazy to sell it to them. The second thing was to trick Jiang Hai with $300 million. Was Jiang Hai out of his mind? Did he lack $300 million? If this matter had happened in China, it would have been easy to settle. However, the problem was that this was America. Hence, there was only one word that could be used: no. That's true. TSK, TSK. But the tea and wine there are really good. TSK, tisk. Hearing Director Lu's words, Deputy Director Li was relieved. Indeed, this was not their responsibility, and it had nothing to do with them. They should just enjoy the rest of the time. After these two people decided to give up on Jiang Hai's side was very calm. After making a phone call to Deputy Director Li in the morning, Jiang Hai once again began to live a very indifferent life. Every day, he was so lazy that it made people's hair stand on end. Everyone in his family also had their own duties. To be honest, Jiang Hai's life every day was both enviable and boring. Because he had nothing to do. He had money, he had women, he ate the best beef in the world, the best fish and shrimp, the best pork, the best vegetables, and he drank the best wine in the world. He really didn't have any pursuits to speak of. Other people had to have a goal to strive for, but he didn't have a goal. Just like a certain rich man said, set a goal for yourself first. Earn 100 million, and see how many years it would take to earn that much. Jiang Hai realized that it wouldn't take long for him to earn 100 million. He wasn't the kind of person who liked to seek excitement and difficulties. This was also related to the changes in society and his inner growth. He remembered that when he was in school, he liked the feeling of passion the most. When he was in elementary school and junior high school, watching Digimon or Slam Dunk could make him feel passionate for half a day. When he was in junior high school and high school, watching One Piece, Naruto, Shinigami, and so on could also make him forget himself. Why were they all Japanese? Let's just ignore this for now. At that time, everything had to be done with passion. Young children liked to imitate the style of sci-fi movies the most. Jiang Hai had also fantasized that he had transmigrated to another world with passion, leveling up and killing monsters in another world. Or he had some ability to benefit the people, destroy the beautiful island, unify the world, and establish a global village. But when he was 25 years old, Jiang Hai knew that it was all just a fantasy. When he was thinking about these things, it was boring and didn't matter. But people still had to eat. When society smoothed out people's edges and corners, people's pursuits also changed. Just like Jiang Hai. In the past, he was still fantasizing about becoming Long Outyan. But now, he was just enjoying his current life. This was not inspirational at all, and he had no feelings. No one liked Jiang Hai, who had no passion at all. But Jiang Hai liked it, and his friends, to be honest, were envious of him. People's pursuits were different. Some people were obsessed with making others admire them. Some people were obsessed with changing the world. Some people were willing to make themselves busy so that they could improve themselves. But in Jiang Hai's eyes, it was just a job. Wasn't it? If it wasn't to earn money, who would want to work? The most important problem now was that Jiang Hai was not short of money. So this proposition ended perfectly. In this way, Jiang Hai lay on his reclining chair again, lying in a drunken stupor for a few days. Today was as usual. After Jiang Hai finished eating in the morning, he went to the manor casually and then went to his own big tree in the small courtyard to rest. He was ready for lunch in this busy day. But at this moment, a doorbell rang. Jiang Hai looked and saw a delivery van parked in front of his house. Coming. Looking at the reluctant driver sitting in the car, Jiang Hai curled his lips. After a shout, he rode past the driver's small four-wheeled motorcycle and drove toward the door. To be honest, in the past, on some forums in China, there were a lot of people talking about how good the US was, etc. But no one said that the US express delivery was good. In fact, the Chinese express delivery companies were much better than the US by more than one street. No, they were even better than the US by several national highways. The United States express delivery was quite bad. The service attitude was very bad, extremely bad, especially bad. There was never the saying of door-to-door delivery, and the attitude was very bad. The speed was so slow that it was outrageous. If you bought something on Amazon in the United States, 9 days was the standard time. Because it said that the delivery time was 3 to 7 days, excluding holidays. Saturday and Sunday were also holidays. So, basically, you will need 9 days to buy anything. Don't complain that it was too long, because this was the standard time. If you think it's too long, you can add more money and it will be delivered the next day. But the problem is, the extra money might be more expensive than the items you bought. In China, even the express delivery will be delivered within a week. Of course, there will be some accidents. But most of the time, it will be delivered within 4 days. Also, the express delivery service will be very good and will call in advance to check if there is anyone at home. For example, in Bing City, where Jiang Hai lives, the express delivery service will be delivered to his doorstep. In some southern cities, if the express delivery service is not delivered to the doorstep, they will put it in the delivery box in the neighborhood. But in the United States, it was impossible. The express delivery service will be delivered directly to your doorstep. If you live in an apartment, the express delivery service will call you. If you live in a small villa, the express delivery service will knock on your door. If you are not at home, the express delivery service will be sent back. The express delivery service will tell you that you have 1 day to collect it tomorrow. If you don't collect it yourself, the express delivery service will be sent back. The express delivery service will not be returned. If you still want to buy the express delivery service, then you will have to pay for another set of express delivery service. Also, it's best to inform your neighbor to help you receive the express delivery service. Of course, in the United States, because there were more people who sent strange things, it was hard to say whether your neighbor was willing to accept it. The express delivery fee was very expensive, the speed was very slow, and the attitude was very bad. Therefore, the American people were not so addicted to online shopping. It was impossible to buy something that cost a few dollars or more than $10 by express delivery, and it was impossible in the United States. In the United States, anything that can be bought at the roadside shops will not be sent by express delivery service. But Jiang Hai and his family had many dealings with express delivery service. This was because Jiang Hai's family had 2 WeChat businessmen. What is it this time? Jiang Hai asked the 2 people in the car as he rode the 4-wheeled motorcycle to the gate. Who knows? It's so heavy. Oh my God, man, the woman in your family is really a spendthrift. Looking at Jiang Hai, a person in the car came down and took out a large cardboard box from the back. He handed it to Jiang Hai and said with an unhappy face. Jiang Hai had long been used to this kind of attitude, so he just smiled and said nothing. After taking a look, the package was sent from San Francisco. Jiang Hai frowned. He didn't know what was inside, but it was really heavy. After signing his name, the person in the van left directly. Jiang Hai put the huge box on the small car and moved it back to his house. As soon as he moved in, Jiang Hai saw Feng Yunqian and Ai Xiaoxi running out of the house anxiously. You guys, what did you buy? Looking at the 2 people in front of him, Jiang Hai knew that they must have bought something, but Jiang Hai didn't know what they bought. Heartless, this is for you. But who knew, when Jiang Hai said this, the 2 people rolled their eyes at him at the same time, and then said to Jiang Hai. Hearing their words, Jiang Hai was even more confused. What is it that they bought for me? Chapter 789. You bought it for me? What did you buy for me? Hearing their words, Jiang Hai looked at them with some doubts. He really didn't know. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but roll their eyes at him. Then they took out a bunch of keys and cut open the tape outside the package. Then a golden thing appeared in front of Jiang Hai. After taking a closer look, Jiang Hai looked at the two of them strangely, because the thing in this box, speaking of it, is really a bit unlucky. This is a box of paper, but Jiang Hai is no stranger to this paper. It is the paper burned for the elderly at home. This is not easy to get in the United States. Only San Francisco, where a large number of Chinese live, has this thing. But Jiang Hai really doesn't understand, why do they have to make these things? The Qingming festival is already over. We're almost there, idiot. Looking at Jiang Hai's confused expression, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but scold him. In fact, a few days ago, when she was on the phone with her family, her mother asked her if she would come back for the Mid-Autumn Festival. After all, they haven't seen Ai Xiaoxi for a long time. After confirming that she wouldn't come back for the festival, she casually said that she would visit her grandfather's grave in a few days. After Ai Xiaoxi heard it, she also wrote it down. Then she quietly bought this box of paper for Jiang Hai. It is indeed almost there, and Jiang Hai won't go back to Bingqing to pay his respects. It is enough to burn paper here to express his sincerity. As for whether it can be sent, who knows? In fact, this thing is more of a formality, a way for the living to remember their ancestors. According to materialistic thinking, when a person dies, there is nothing left. No one knows if there is really a soul or something like that. Anyway, Jiang Hai has never seen it. As for Jiang Hai's generation, not many people believe in this thing. Perhaps in a few decades, when the next generation of Jiang Hai and the others grew up, even this tradition would probably disappear. For Jiang Hai, he didn't really remember things like burning paper offerings. Just like what his mother said, what was the use of being unfilial when alive and screaming when dead? People should be filial when they're alive. Once they're gone, no matter how ostentatious they are, it's just for show. The people who should be filial to them can't be remembered. Therefore, before Ai Xiaoxi came, Jiang Hai would only burn it during the Qingming festival. During the New Year, he would go home and burn it. That was all. But now that Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan still remembered this matter, Jiang Hai was quite pleased. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have remembered. What's the date? Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai touched his hair and smiled. This thing doesn't have a date to burn it. The day after tomorrow is the date, but we can burn it tonight or tomorrow. She rolled her eyes at Jiang Hai. It seemed that Jiang Hai really didn't understand this, and Ai Xiaoxi knew a little about this because she was born in the countryside. Among the traditional festivals of Huaxia, there were 3 festivals, but everyone was familiar with only the Shanyuan festival, which was the 15th day of the first lunar month. It was commonly known as the Lantern Festival, and so on. For modern people, after the 15th day, it meant that the new year had passed. Of course, in the current situation, very few people would go to work after the 15th day of the first lunar month. Basically, after the 5th day of the first lunar month, the 6th day, and the 7th day of the first lunar month, they would go to work. The rhythm of people's lives now was completely different from ancient times. In addition to the Shanyuan Lantern Festival, very few people knew about the Zhongyuan and Shiyuan festivals. The 3 festivals were mainly related to Taoism. Taoism had 3 officials, the heavenly official, the earthly official, and the water official. The so-called heavenly official gave blessings, so in ancient times, everyone celebrated the Shanyuan festival. This was passed down. The earthly official pardoned sins, and the water official resolved disasters. The birthdays of the 3 officials were the 15th day of the first lunar month, the 15th day of the 7th lunar month, and the 15th day of the 10th lunar month. In ancient times, the 15th day of the 10th lunar month was the time for the big families to worship their ancestors, but it was no longer the time. After all, after the establishment of the new Huaxia, there were no more families to speak of, so Jiang Hai and the others did not celebrate the Shanyuan festival. As for the Zhongyuan festival, not many people knew about it, but in recent years, when the traditional culture of Huaxia was promoted, it also seemed to be publicized. At this time of the year, there were sparks of fire everywhere in Huaxia. It was basically the same everywhere in the country, but there was no worship on the official day. There seemed to be some theories about it. Jiang Hai did not understand these, but since Ai Xiaoxi knew, then he would just follow her explanation. After understanding the situation, Jiang Hai and the others began to sort out the things in the box. There was a lot of yellow paper in the box, and there were also a lot of paper money. In addition, there were also a lot of folded paper, such as gold ingots. Every place had different customs and things, but the northeast where Jiang Hai was from was somewhat similar to the customs of Lu province. After all, many people in the northeast had gone there when Lu province went to Guangdong, so Jiang Hai just had to listen to Ai Xiaoxi for a lot of things. After working for half a day, Jiang Hai finished these things before night fell. Qi Jia and Qia had seen these things before, so they were not surprised. On the other hand, Aphrodite and the others were a little confused. Delina and Marian had gone back with Jiang Hai during the new year, so they had naturally seen these things, so they were not unfamiliar with them. After Jiang Hai briefly explained it to these people, at night, Jiang Hai and the others left the manor. They could not burn this thing in their own house. Even though Jiang Hai's house was so big, they could not burn it in their own house. According to the older generation, burning this thing would attract some ghost messengers and wandering ghosts. Attracting them into their own house was obviously not a wise choice. Therefore, they had to go out and find a crossroad to burn. After driving for more than 10 minutes to Winthrop, Jiang Hai and the others found a large crossroad. They did not know if crossroads were useful in the United States, but Jiang Hai was just doing his best. He first went to find a branch, then drew a circle, leaving an opening in the middle. This was the place for the ghost servants to withdraw money. Then, Jiang Hai ignited the yellow paper he had written that address on. Then, he began to chant as he placed the paper in the circle. Not long after, the raging fire started to burn. Even from afar, people were able to see it. Many people who lived around the town saw the fire. Some people even called the police. What a joke. In the United States, Huaxia had many customs that were difficult to understand. For example, Chinese medicine, ceremonies, speaking habits, etc. Jiang Hai had said this before. Huaxia liked to be polite when talking to each other. For example, I'll treat you to a meal when you have time. Next time, let's get together when we have the chance. Huaxia always said such things. But in the United States, if you said such things, this person would really wait for you to treat him to a meal and get together with him. You could go Dutch. If you did not look for him, he would be unhappy and think that you were lying to him. Some radical people could not even be friends. There were also some people who boiled Chinese medicine at home. Then, their neighbors would call the police and say that they were making drugs at home. It was the same during ceremonies. In the United States, other than during protests, gatherings had to be reported to the government. As for the Chinese, this was an accident. This was because the Chinese in the United States did not have the idea of having only one child. Therefore, a Chinese family was sometimes really big. To them, it was time to meet their ancestors or gather together. Hundreds of people had come all of a sudden. In the beginning, it had alarmed the police quite a bit. It was only in recent years that things had gotten better. As for burning paper during the ceremony, this was naturally not allowed in the United States. However, Jiang Hai did not know about this. Other people did not know either. When people saw Jiang Hai and the others burning paper, some good citizens called the police. They did not know what Jiang Hai was doing, so it was better to let the police ask. Just as Jiang Hai and the others were burning paper, 2 police cars drove over. After seeing that it was Jiang Hai, the people who got out of the 2 police cars were much more polite. They smiled and walked to Jiang Hai's side. Mr. Jiang, what are you doing here? Looking at Jiang Hai, who was still burning paper, the two police officers asked curiously. Burning paper. How should I explain this? This is a custom in Huaxia when we pay respects to our ancestors who have passed away. Is this not allowed? Seeing that the police had come over, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Then, he remembered that this might not be allowed. After all, in the United States, people would send flowers during ceremonies. No one would burn paper. What Jiang Hai was doing now seemed to be somewhat problematic. There are indeed some residents who don't know what you are doing, so they reported it to us. I don't know how long you will be doing this. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two policemen also smiled. This matter is really not easy to say. If it was someone else, they might have opened their mouth to drive them away. But since it was Jiang Hai, they really couldn't say anything. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's burning of paper was also very fast. After hearing their words, Jiang Hai and the others also sped up their pace. After about 10 minutes, the things in the box were all burned. Seeing that the fire had burned through, Jiang Hai and the others also apologized, then got in the car and left. After Jiang Hai and the others left, the two police officers came and watched the fire go out before leaving. Otherwise, if there was a fire or something like that, Jiang Hai couldn't run away, and they couldn't run away either. It seems that I can't burn paper casually in the future. Touching his nose, Jiang Hai grinned. This was indeed a very annoying thing. Although Jiang Hai didn't care much about these formal problems, he would still burn paper when it was time. But next time, he might have to find a way to burn it again. Chapter 790. The incident of the Hungry Ghost Festival was just a small episode for Jiang Hai. However, Qi Jia, Chia, Feng Yunqin, and Ai Xiaoxi were tempted to watch horror movies. Therefore, in the past few nights, they deliberately found a few movies to watch, such as A Nightmare on Elm Street, True Ghost Stories, and so on. They were all frightened. Jiang Hai was the only man in the family. Although it seemed that Azalina and Galina felt more secure, Jiang Hai was still their best choice. He had to admit that, unlike China, where people were not allowed to become spirits or ghosts after the founding of the country, there were really ghosts abroad, so the degree of horror was indeed not bad. However, with Jiang Hai's strong heart, it was not easy to scare him. However, he felt that the scariest movie was a movie called Horror Cruise. This movie was filmed in Australia and Europe, and had nothing to do with the United States. However, it was indeed quite scary. The horror was not about what was in it. To be honest, there were no ghosts in it, and there was not even much blood. However, there was something that struck Jiang Hai's heart the most. Reincarnation. This story was about a woman named Jessie. She was not a good mother. She would abuse her children. Then one day, she went out to sea with a group of bad friends to play. In the end, there was an accident and the boat capsized. At this time, a cruise ship floated over. Then, they walked on it, and then a horrible scene appeared, because Jessie was constantly killing people, and she was also killing herself. Every Jessie had to kill 5 people. The 2 groups of people who boarded the ship early, Victor who boarded the ship later, and Donnie, Sally, and Greg who boarded the ship later. She would throw the bodies into the sea, and then she would be killed. The one who killed her was herself. She used this to complete a cycle. She would be killed by her next self indefinitely. This was her fate. The first generation fell into the sea and drowned in order to avoid the second generation's axe. The second generation was chopped by the third generation on the deck several times and thrown into the sea. In the endless cycle of reincarnation, this was a rather brain-burning piece of work. Jiang Hai didn't know why, but when he watched this horror movie, he felt that it was the scariest. Because of this, he was depressed for several days. He was afraid that one day, he would open his eyes and find that he had been hacked to death by his other self. Well, actually, it was just that he was a little crazy from watching movies. For a few days, Jiang Hai's condition was not very good. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's mental fortitude was strong enough, and he almost forgot about it after a few days. The small episode of the Hungry Ghost Festival passed by unknowingly. After the Hungry Ghost Festival, Turaga started to get busy because she was preparing to go to school. In fact, the end of August was very busy. For example, the grapes were ripe, and it was time to catch tuna. But the problem was that Jiang Hai was now busy with fishing missions in the manor every day. Who would catch tuna? In this way, before the tuna was caught, the grapes were ripe. Naturally, everyone was rushing to harvest the grapes. Jiang Hai was also the main force, but only two people had nothing to do with the grapes. One was Turaga, and the other was Qi Jie. After all, she still had to make up for classes. Under such circumstances, on September 1st, school started. Turaga also officially became a student of Winthrop High School. Early in the morning, Qi Jie and the others didn't go to the wine manor early to help. Instead, they dressed up Turaga. At this time, Turaga was like an American high school student. She wore a white chiffon shirt and a pair of slightly tight jeans, which perfectly outlined her curves. She wore a pair of Nike Air Mag shoes. Well, in fact, Jiang Hai originally wanted to buy these shoes. Everyone knew that Jiang Hai actually liked basketball. Although he didn't play anymore, he had collected a lot of sneakers in his house. These were called the strongest basketball shoes in the future. Jiang Hai also had them, but he had only worn them a few times. The inspiration for these sneakers came from a movie, From the Past to the Future. It was said that they were made to pay tribute to that movie. Although Jiang Hai hadn't seen it, it didn't stop him from buying it. This pair of shoes cost $5,000, so Jiang Hai bought it. Turaga, on the other hand, had lived in a tribe since she was a child. Her aesthetic point of view was different from that of the girls outside. For clothes, the most important thing was to be loose, sturdy, and breathable. As for shoes, she still liked to wear hiking shoes. However, Jiang Hai didn't let her wear them. When she looked at Jiang Hai's shoe cabinet, she liked this pair of shoes at first glance. Of course, Jiang Hai's shoes were definitely big for her. She had bought this pair with the pocket money Jiang Hai had given her. It could also be seen that Jiang Hai was quite generous with the money. $5,000 for a pair of shoes, and he bought it just like that. After dressing up, Turaga put on her shoulder bag and said goodbye to Qi Jie and the others. She would come back in the evening. After she got into Jiang Hai's car, Jiang Hai started the engine and drove her to the town. What's wrong? Are you nervous? Seeing that Turaga was fidgeting in the passenger seat, Jiang Hai smiled and said to her. To be honest, Jiang Hai would never go to school again in his life, because he really didn't want to go to school. But that didn't stop him from finding Turaga's nervous look funny. It's okay. Wrinkling her nose at Jiang Hai, Turaga didn't feel uncomfortable. She smiled and said to Jiang Hai. After you go to school, you can make some friends. Of course, you can't casually get a boyfriend. Don't forget, I won your virginity. Seeing that she was still a little nervous, Jiang Hai deliberately said with a straight face. However, he said this completely to relax. He didn't feel that way about Turaga. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Turaga couldn't help but smile. She relaxed a lot, then she nodded very seriously. The more I talk about it, the more I feel that you're a bad student. But one last thing, don't get bullied in school. Kids at this age don't know how to control their strength. If anyone dares to bully you, hit them back. You should know that I'm a local tyrant in Winthrop. I'm already being fair to these people by not bullying them. If they dare to show off, teach them a good lesson. If they dare to bully you, don't mess with them. Seeing that Turaga relaxed a little, Jiang Hai also said calmly. He was like a typical Huaxia parent, a typical Huaxia parent in the Northeast. Most Huaxia parents took the middle road. Children naturally went to school to learn. Other than learning, they shouldn't have conflicts with other children. Fighting was also wrong. If other people hurt their children, they would feel sorry for them. If their children hurt other people's children, they would also feel sorry for them. They would feel sorry for the money spent on treating other people's children. However, in Jiang Hai's family, the education from a young age was that one couldn't suffer losses. If one didn't do well in the exam, he would naturally be beaten when he returned home. However, if he was beaten when he went out, he would still be beaten when he returned home. On the contrary, if he beat others back, he would be rewarded when he returned home. Therefore, Jiang Hai also followed his family's tradition and instilled in Taraga that if someone dared to bully her, she should go up and beat him up. No matter who he was, even if he was the king, Jiang Hai wouldn't be afraid. If there were boys who dared to be tough, Jiang Hai would teach them a lesson. If there were many people, the people in Jiang Hai's manor weren't to be trifled with. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Taraga also nodded vigorously. In fact, she was also a little worried about this. Although Boston was not very strict about racial discrimination at the adult level, it was very serious among children, especially white people discriminating against people of color. This was very normal. Even society was tolerant of this phenomenon. The Stanford University sex case that made a lot of noise a while ago was a typical special case. It was said that a boy at Stanford saw a girl drinking too much and then picked up her corpse. If the same thing happened to a Hua Xia or a black person, they wouldn't be able to escape 4 years in prison. However, the boy's parents wrote a letter to the judge, saying that their son had a bright future and couldn't be locked up in prison. Therefore, the 4-year sentence became 6 months. It was said that because of good behavior, he would be released in 3 months. This was a slap to the faces of many people who had been clamoring for the fairness of the American law in China. However, Jiang Hai didn't express any opinions when he saw it because in a sense, he was also a member of this privileged group. In the United States, black people, white people, and yellow people were all nonsense. In this seemingly free country, there were only 2 kinds of people, the rich and the poor. Fortunately, Jiang Hai was the former. So even if Taraga really did what he said and killed someone, Jiang Hai could guarantee that nothing would happen to her. At most, she would go to prison for a few days, and then do community service. Of course, it was just talk here. Jiang Hai was not the kind of person who liked to cause trouble. After instilling a lot of violent things in Taraga, Jiang Hai had unknowingly arrived in front of Winthrop High School. At this time, many cars had stopped in front of Winthrop High School. Jiang Hai did not use his privilege to block them. Instead, he parked the car far away, and then walked toward the school's main gate with Taraga. Along the way, many people recognized Jiang Hai and took the initiative to greet him. Jiang Hai also responded to them one by one. In the eyes of Winthrop people, he was the god of fortune and also a demon, but he was also an angel. As long as they didn't provoke him, Jiang Hai's temper was still very good. After greeting all the way, the two also came to the school gate. Chapter 791. Remember what I told you. If anyone dares to show off to you, you have to teach them a lesson. Do you hear me? Before Taraga entered the school, Jiang Hai purposely turned her head and spoke to her seriously. Okay, I'll remember. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Taraga nodded vigorously and ran into the school with a smile. Looking at her figure, Jiang Hai also smiled. Ah, youth. I'd rather not reminisce about it. Go back and continue harvesting grapes. After seeing Taraga wave her hand and enter the crowd, Jiang Hai also looked at the time and prepared to go back and continue harvesting grapes. This year's grape harvest was almost 50% more than last year's. With 50% more grapes, he could make 50% more wine. All of this was money. Mr. Jiang Hai? Please wait a moment. Just as Jiang Hai was about to turn and leave, a feminine voice suddenly sounded. Then, Jiang Hai looked over and saw a white man about 1.8 meters tall running over with girlish steps. However, Jiang Hai didn't know what to do when he called out to him. This was because Jiang Hai also knew this person. This person was the vice principal and dean of Winthrop High School. Well, this high school was indeed relatively small, unlike the legendary high schools. Therefore, many teachers specialized in teaching for several years. This was also very normal. After all, this wasn't some aristocratic school. What's the matter, Teacher Fard? Jiang Hai stopped walking when he saw the person in front of him and asked in confusion. It's like this, Mr. Jiang. You know Boston, right? There's a Paul Pierce over there, you know, the one who plays basketball, you know. Hearing this guy keep saying, you know, right? Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows. What the hell was this? And he had to say it every half a sentence. Didn't he feel tired? Let him be a chatterbox. Well, can you get to the point? I still have a lot of things to do, so. Jiang Hai looked at the man in front of him. He pointed at his watch and said seriously. Okay, I'll get to the point right away. This Paul Pierce organizes a charity game every year. Although he doesn't play in Boston anymore, his home is still here. He still has a lot of influence. He invites some NBA players and celebrities to participate. Hearing him talking, Jiang Hai couldn't sit still anymore. Do you want me to donate some money? If it was for charity, then Jiang Hai was willing to donate some money. It was impossible to donate all of it, but it wouldn't be a problem to donate a few 100,000 or even 1,000,000 yuan. No, no, no. This charity game doesn't accept donations. The main purpose of this game is to make young people like basketball more, so he will find some high school stadiums. The money from the tickets will be donated directly to the high school. The place he finds will be the target of the donation. This year, he chose our school's stadium. Although it's not a lot of money, it's still an opportunity for exposure, so we agreed. However, there's an unwritten rule, and that is, the local team has to send a player. I remember that you used to be quite good at basketball, so can you represent Winthrop in this game? The vice principal looked at Jiang Hai with a hopeful expression. Indeed, Winthrop was not a town that liked basketball very much. In the eastern part of the United States, no, in the entire United States, basketball was not a very popular sport. The most popular sport here was football. Other than that, it was baseball. Basketball was easy to promote because it was simple. A flat field, a basketball rack, and a basketball could be played. Most importantly, one person could play it, 2 people could play it, 3 people could play it, 4 people could play it, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people could play it, and 12 people could play it on the same field. It was simple and convenient, so it was easy to promote. However, it was far from being popular. The people of Winthrop didn't like basketball very much. The highest level of competition in American high schools was the state level. Massachusetts was a small state to begin with. There were less than 35 towns and cities with high schools in their names. However, Winthrop's school team couldn't even get into the top 32 of the state. It could be said that they lived at the bottom of the food chain. It was easy to form a football team in Winthrop, but it was too difficult to form a basketball team. Jiang Hai was rumored to be a good player and was almost signed by the Boston Celtics. Therefore, he looked for Jiang Hai and hoped that Jiang Hai could represent their school. After hearing what he said, Jiang Hai should not have agreed. After all, he was scolded badly the last time he played basketball. However, they were all from the same village, so Jiang Hai could not reject them directly. He could only go back and think about it. Then I'll go back and think about it. When is the game? Jiang Hai asked the vice principal in front of him. September 7th and 15th. They will report to the team, so the game is September 13th. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the vice principal immediately said. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai nodded, indicating that he understood. Then, he returned to his car and drove back. After he parked his car in the courtyard, he didn't relax today. Instead, he washed his face and went to his wine manor. When he arrived, he found that as long as it was the people in his manor, they had nothing to do. They were all busy here. It was quite lively. After Jiang Hai came over, everyone greeted Jiang Hai. Then Jiang Hai put on gloves. He was not good at cutting grapes, and he could easily damage the main vine. So his job last year was to carry grapes. With his strength, there was no problem at all. It was the same this year. After putting on gloves, Jiang Hai walked to a full basket and used his arms. The basket that usually took 2 people to carry was very stable in Jiang Hai's hands. In fact, this basket was about 50 kilograms. If it were not for fear of spilling, Jiang Hai could carry 8 or 9 baskets by himself. But from this, it could be seen that the strength of the women in Jiang Hai's manor was not small. The 2 of them carried 50 kilograms of things back and forth so many times, but they did not feel tired. Indeed, under the circumstances of absorbing spirit energy and eating well, these women's strength was not small, especially those who often exercised. For example, Qi Jia could now bench press 160 kilograms and push 15 people. This was already stronger than most men. However, the muscles on her body were not explosive, but streamlined and very good-looking. Of course, this was also because they did not eat protein powder. Unknowingly, the morning's work was finished. With the addition of Jiang Hai, the speed was faster. We're all experienced this year, so our harvest speed is much faster than expected. We should finish harvesting around the 3rd or 4th of July. As for the remaining grapes, let's leave them for a while longer. We'll harvest them after the winter frost and use them to make ice wine. Looking at the grapevines in front of him, Dulles Gerard could not help but smile and say to Jiang Hai beside him. These were all money, he was very sure. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Yes, these were all money. Lowering his head, Jiang Hai ate a piece of beef and took a bite of a steamed bun. His eyes also narrowed. Eating after working really tasted good. Around 11:30 in the afternoon, it was time to rest. Jiang Hai and the others had lunch. Naturally, it was not as sumptuous as usual. They just ate a simple bite. After all, everyone was very tired. Lunch was prepared by Chia with Delina and Marion in advance. It was basically very simple food. A large pot of beef stewed with potatoes was stewed. Americans like to eat stewed potatoes very much. As long as there was stewed potatoes, there was nothing they did not like. A large pot of quite thick beef stewed with potatoes, plus a large pot of stir-fried rape roasted potatoes. The rape mentioned here was not the kind of rapeseed from the south, but the rapeseed from the north. In the south, it was also called ladle white. After being fried with oil, the taste of the potatoes was quite good. Jiang Hai usually liked to eat it. In addition to these 2 dishes, there was also a large pot of vegetables and fruit salad, which was also considered as dessert after the meal. The staple food was a large basket of white bread and a basket of steamed buns. They could eat whatever they liked. After lunch, everyone sat together and chatted for a while. After resting for a while, they got up again and began to cut grapes. Then, they were busy for the whole afternoon. As time went by, it was past 4 in the afternoon. Everyone tidied up their tired mood and returned to the villa. Galina left early because she had to pick up Taraga from school. During dinner in the evening, everyone was asking Taraga about the school. Taraga was also very excited and kept talking about the school. And it seemed that she was really popular. On the first day of school, she made 2 friends. One was a somewhat cowardly white girl, and the other was also a colored person, who was the white girl's neighbor. Chapter 792. She's afraid of everything: rats, cockroaches, snakes, insects. So she's always been bullied by bad boys. Her parents are doctors, and she has a good personality, but she's very timid. When their daughter gets bullied, they can't do anything except sigh at home. Fortunately, Pearl's personality is similar to mine. She likes to fight for justice. They're neighbors, and their relationship has always been good. At the dinner table, Taraga kept talking about her classmates. One of the two protagonists in her story was Bessie Oliver, a white girl. She was timid and pretty, so she was often bullied by bad boys. The other one was Pearl Circe, a black girl. When Jiang Hai heard this, he thought of another black girl named Circe. That person was called Hodge Circe, and he sold parts in a shop in Winthrop. He didn't know if the two were related. If they were, then it would be too much of a coincidence. Okay, we know you're excited, but you should go take a bath now, and then go back to sleep. Looking at Taraga, who had been talking, Chi Jia glanced at the time. Unknowingly, it was almost 9 o'clock. For other people, they had to go to bed early. They still had work tomorrow, and Taraga also had school tomorrow. After hearing Chi Jia's words, everyone smiled and responded. After clearing the table together, the group walked to the hot spring. Since Jiang Hai's hot spring was created, it really played a big role. In the winter, they didn't want to come out to take a bath, but the hot spring water could be directly brought home. Now that they could take a bath, they directly came here to soak. It was really a very enjoyable thing. After Jiang Hai and the others walked here, they went into their own rooms. After changing his clothes, Jiang Hai also came to his bathroom. He washed his hair first, then simply used a bath gel. After washing the mud and dust off his body, he slowly walked into the stone hot spring. When the warm water filled his mouth, Jiang Hai's face showed a hint of enjoyment. It was really very comfortable. Leaning his head on the stone, Jiang Hai closed his eyes. Jiang Hai's hot spring was made of stone. Of course, on the side of the stone, there was still a cement base, but the top layer was made of stone. Don't think that his hot spring was a simple stone pool. Under Jiang Hai's hot spring, he made a perfect waterproof and water circulation treatment. Water will constantly come out of the spring, and then the water will flow into the stone pool. When the water reaches the stone, it will flow to the side of the drain, and then, after a cycle, the impurities inside will be filtered, and then discharged into the artificial river next to the pool. In this way, it would not be wasted, and it was very clean. As for the hot spring water connected to the house, it was another line. It was not Jiang Hai's bathwater. Jiang Hai had already considered this when he built it. Feeling the water flow outside his body, Jiang Hai closed his eyes. He was busy today, and he did not have the leisure and time to think about the problem that the vice principal said to him today. Playing basketball. To be honest, this was a good place to slap his face and pretend to be a hero. But the problem was that Jiang Hai did not know whether he should go or not. Recalling the time when he went to play basketball and was scolded miserably, Jiang Hai still wiped his face. Forget it, I won't go. With a soft sigh, Jiang Hai whispered. What do you mean you won't go? But at this moment, a voice sounded from the side. Jiang Hai looked back and found that Feng Yunshen had walked into the bathroom on his side. At this time, she was wrapped in a bath towel, her long hair was hanging down, and she was wearing a pair of cute pink slippers on her feet. Then she walked in just like that. Facing Jiang Hai's gaze, she walked to Jiang Hai's side and untied the bath towel. In an instant, her graceful figure appeared in front of Jiang Hai. To be honest, Jiang Hai and Feng Yunshen had known each other for a long time, but for now, her status in the manor was only a little higher than Aphrodite's. Usually, Jiang Hai did not care about this, but now when the two were facing each other, Jiang Hai really did not know how to feel about Feng Yunshen. But Feng Yunshen did not know this at this time. She just let out a sigh of relief and slowly slid down to sit beside Jiang Hai. Why are you here? Looking at Feng Yunshen beside him, Jiang Hai naturally wrapped his arms around her, and then with a little force, he hugged her to his body. His head rested on Feng Yunshen's shoulder, and his hands wrapped around her lower abdomen, so that her butt and his thighs were completely pressed together. Feng Yunshen did not care about Jiang Hai's actions. Instead, she enjoyed it very much. I missed you, so I came to see you. It seems that we haven't been alone for a long time. Turning her head and glancing at Jiang Hai, Feng Yunshan said with a smile. After that, she turned her body and hugged Jiang Hai. Feeling this fragrant jade in his arms, Jiang Hai almost went berserk, but fortunately, after hearing her words, he endured it. I don't know what to say. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai scratched his head helplessly because he didn't know what to say. He really didn't think that he would provoke so many women. But now that he had provoked them, he didn't know what to say, especially when his woman talked about this topic. Well, I know you don't know how to refuse, and the most important thing is that you have become like this. It seems that I have some problems too. Looking at Jiang Hai's somewhat overwhelmed look, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but smile and say to him. Because in fact, she was the one who introduced AI Xiaoxi to Jiang Hai, and she even took the initiative to send AI Xiaoxi to Jiang Hai's bed. At the beginning, she really didn't like Jiang Hai. She was with Jiang Hai at the beginning. In fact, one was to solve the physiological problems she also needed, and the other was to find a spare tire. After all, she couldn't always follow an old man. It's just that after finding Jiang Hai, she found that Jiang Hai was really a perfect lover. He was perfect in that aspect, had money, and a good character. In this case, she was thinking about how to maintain Jiang Hai as a lover. So she came over to take photos, and then introduced AI Xiaoxi to Jiang Hai to maintain Jiang Hai. However, as the time they spent together grew longer and longer, people's hearts were made of flesh. Things like feelings would indeed slowly breed. There was an old saying that said, love grows with time. No matter how you understood this sentence was slowly taking root and sprouting in Feng Yunshan's heart. It's just us now, or we. Feeling Feng Yunshan's body in the true feelings she revealed, Jiang Hai couldn't help but hug her back. His eyes stared at her like this, and the meaning was already obvious. Not now. It's us tonight. Why are you in such a hurry? I just want to talk to you properly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan was indeed a little lost for a moment, but she quickly reacted. Although she also wanted to, she knew her situation. If she couldn't help but cry out, it would be embarrassing. So it's better to go back to the room first. But she felt the change in Jiang Hai under the water, and she couldn't help but blush. She knew that she had to divert Jiang Hai's attention at this time. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to control Jiang Hai later. By the way, when I came in, I heard you say something about not going? Looking at Jiang Hai, Feng Yunshan asked a little strangely. Oh, I sent Taraga to school today. Their vice principal told me that their school had NBA players who came to organize a charity game. I'm also a local celebrity, so he asked me to be a player and participate. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai shrugged. It doesn't matter if he tells them about it. Then if you have nothing to do, you can go. This is a good opportunity to show your face. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, she just wants Jiang Hai to play basketball. It's not for winning or anything. If he wants to play, then go. Hasn't Jiang Hai been working on his exposure in Winthrop recently? Why not go? I'm a little scared. Last time, I just went for a physical test and I was scolded by a lot of people. If I go to play basketball this time, TSK. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai is really a little guilty. He doesn't know what to do. Hey, what are you worried about? You're not going to play professionally. You're just going to participate in a charity game. You're going to show off and then run away. What a good theme, isn't it? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan smiled and said with a smile. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, then touched his chin. Is this really a good idea? Don't worry, if you want to go, then go. If you don't want to go, then don't go. No one can control you. Really, anyway, you're not really going to play professionally, hee. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan also said with a smile. Thank you for helping me make up my mind. I have to thank you properly. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Oh, I always like to scare myself. I really like sports. Since I'm playing this and not going to play professionally, what's there to worry about? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai also carried Feng Yunshan out of the water and looked at her with a smile. You let go. I will moan when I do that. Patting Jiang Hai's mouth, Feng Yunshan naturally knew what Jiang Hai was going to do. She blushed and said to Jiang Hai, then let them listen. Following Jiang Hai's sinister smile, the battle began. Chapter 793. Pa, I haven't played for a long time, I don't know if I can still play. After patting the basketball on the floor, Jiang Hai muttered in a low voice. Then, his eyes turned cold, and he focused his attention on the opposite basket. After Feng Yunshan talked to Jiang Hai that night, when Jiang Hai went to send Taraga to school the next day, he told the vice principal that he would be there and that he would be a local Winthrop. After getting Jiang Hai's affirmation, the vice principal was also very excited. This time, there were a total of 3 people from Winthrop participating in this charity game. One was Jiang Hai, and the other 2 were from the school team. After confirming that Jiang Hai would participate, the vice principal was relieved. The vice principal finally felt relieved. Jiang Hai spent the next few days in the vineyard busily working. Finally, Jiang Hai and the others harvested all the grapes that should be harvested yesterday. There were about 2 acres of grapes left, which were to be used to make ice wine. After Jiang Hai and the others had a good night's rest, the person who sent Taraga to school this morning was Jialina. After eating breakfast and walking around, Jiang Hai came to his warehouse. It was the one that was transformed into a basketball stadium. Although he had never paid attention to this place, it was still very good. After opening the door and letting the smell out, Jiang Hai fetched water and wiped the court. Then, he went to get a basketball. After playing for a while and changing his clothes, Jiang Hai was ready to try it out. Jiang Hai stepped on his favorite LeBron James 10th generation sneakers. Jiang Hai likes to buy sneakers, but some sneakers are for everyday wear, not for playing games. For example, all kinds of sprays. Psychic Boy, Galaxy Sprays, Joe 28 and so on. Jiang Hai naturally bought the authentic ones, and they were for him to wear. But the price, hee. His most expensive pair of sneakers was probably the Air Mag, which cost $5,000 a pair. When he bought the Psychic Boy, he specially went to Nike's official store and spent a lot of money to order it. It only cost $2,000 a pair. In fact, sneakers in the United States were much cheaper than expected. Compared to China, there was a big gap. For example, the Kobe series and LeBron James series were just new models, which were sold for $180. LeBron 10, KD, Kevin Durant, 5, Kobe 7, and so on were sold for $180. The Kobe 8 and John 11 were sold for $200. The most expensive ordinary sneaker was the Kobe 9, $225, the high top. The most expensive sneaker was the Jordan 28, at $250. It was not as expensive as Hua Xia's. It was at least 20% cheaper. Of course, it was the most ordinary sneakers, not limited edition or commemorative sneakers. Therefore, after Jiang Hai came here, he bought a lot of sneakers in order to fulfill his dream of sneakers. But in actual combat, he still liked the LeBron system the most. The quality of the shoes was not bad, but the quality of the shoes was not bad. First of all, Jiang Hai's feet were a bit wide, and the shoes were quite comfortable to walk on. Air Max technology was also his favorite. After testing the feeling of his feet, Jiang Hai took a deep breath and quickly dribbled a few times. Then, he ran towards the basket. The last time he played basketball was when he was still a beginner. At that time, he was already very good. He could jump from the three-point line and dunk. He never missed a shot. Otherwise, those people in Boston would not have specially wanted to sign Jiang Hai after the physical test. But Jiang Hai was not crazy. He was not crazy. Why would he sign a contract with those guys to play basketball? How much did the best NBA players earn in a year? Tens of millions of dollars. Jiang Hai earned more in a year than they earned in their entire professional career. Of course, this included the other players' professional salaries, endorsements, and so on. Even if they were all added together, they would not earn as much as Jiang Hai. Therefore, Jiang Hai did not even think about it and directly rejected it. If such an opportunity was given to him again, he would still reject it. He was not short of money, and he was not stupid. Was he sick in the head to fight with these players for food? Regardless of whether he went to the professional league or not, he had to give it a try. After quickly dribbling the ball past the free throw line, Jiang Hai instantly put the ball away. Then, he jumped up with a bang. Originally, he wanted to do a simple dunk to see how high he could jump. But after jumping up, he realized that he was thinking too much, because he jumped too high. With a bang, by the time he reacted, the basket had already appeared at his waist and he was still rising quickly. This time, Jiang Hai probably only used 70% of his strength, but by the time he reacted, his feet were already on the top edge of the backboard, so he took a step in the air, stepped on the top edge of the backboard, and squatted down. He really didn't think, how could he be so terrifying? If I jump with all my strength now, I can jump almost 4 meters off the ground. No, it should be at least 4.5 meters. F***ck, it seems that I am becoming less and less human. Looking at the standard backboard under his feet, Jiang Hai could not help but click his tongue. This was one of the reasons why he could not play in the NBA. It was too amazing. What if the government wanted to cut him up and study him? After jumping off the backboard again, Jiang Hai started to try. He took off from the free throw line with 50% of his strength. No, his butt was over the top of the backboard. 30%, no, his butt was over the basket. Finally, Jiang Hai tried. 15%. Yes, this was not bad. It was probably his chin over the basket. This was okay. Dunking from the three-point line required 20% of his strength. Below the basket, 5% to 10% was enough. After spending the whole afternoon, Jiang Hai tested his ability to dunk. After making sure that there were no problems, Jiang Hai let out a long sigh of relief. It seems that his physical fitness is too strong, and he can't play basketball. His original decision was correct. After having lunch at noon, Jiang Hai continued to practice in the afternoon. However, this time, he practiced dribbling and shooting. Jiang Hai found that although his physical fitness had improved, his shooting accuracy had not decreased. It was still so good that it made people's hair stand on end. In the past, he had a 100% shooting accuracy in the half court. Now, in the whole court, it was still 100%. If the rules allowed it, he could even directly throw the ball in from the baseline, no matter how far it was. At the same time, he found that when he used to play basketball, he could only throw the ball in one position, which was the proper shooting position. When he threw the ball in other positions, his accuracy was not very good. Now, however, he could throw the ball in any way he wanted. As long as he wanted, he could kick the ball into the basket. Moreover, it was a clean basket. This is too abnormal. Looking at his hand, Jiang Hai did not know what others thought. Anyway, he did not want to play anymore. This was too much of a bully. It was just like when playing a game. It might be fun to use a little cheating device, but when it was used as a cheating device to become invincible, it wasn't fun anymore. At least, that was what Jiang Hai thought now. Therefore, after practicing for a while in the afternoon, Jiang Hai went back. At the same time, he secretly made up his mind. This time, he was going to pretend to be 13. After that, he ran away and solved it cleanly. Why are you back so early? Aren't you going to practice basketball? When Jiang Hai came back, it was only 3:00 in the afternoon. Seeing that Jiang Hai came back, Qi Jia could not help but ask with some doubts. She had been busy these days. While she was busy picking grapes, she was also busy taking care of Taraga's homework. Fortunately, elementary school and junior high school in the United States were basically playing. Therefore, Taraga did not fall too badly in the curriculum, but she still fell behind. As the person with the highest academic qualifications here, Chi Jia was naturally responsible for her homework. As for Delina and Marian, after a month of learning, they now felt a headache when they read books. Jiang Hai had to sigh. Although they were nominally his daughters, in fact, they were very similar to him. Jiang Hai was the kind of person who was not stupid, but he really could not learn. When he saw books, he would feel a headache. Hey, basketball is too simple. When the time comes, you can watch your husband go and kill everyone. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled casually, sat beside her, and said with a proud face. Bah, shameless, whose husband are you? Also, don't think that I don't know that basketball is easy to get started, but it is not easy to play well. Your physical fitness is good, but it is not at the level where you can beat those professional players. I heard from Taraga that this time, there will be many professional players coming. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, Chi Jia wrinkled her nose and said to him. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai just smiled. No matter who comes, he is very confident in himself. With the 2 moves in the training just now, he is already invincible. Well, you will know when the time comes. Watch how I fly to the sky and stand side by side with the sun. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai said with a smile, but just as he was about to boast again, someone patted his shoulder. After turning his head, he found that the person who patted him was not someone else, but Chia. No matter how you fly, you'd better get me some pork now. I want to make double-cooked pork tonight. Hearing Chia's words, Jiang Hai jumped up from the sofa instantly. Double-cooked pork is his favorite dish. Wait for me, I will be back soon. Chapter 794. For the next few days, Jiang Hai's daily life was almost the same. He basically returned to his original life. Every morning, he would get up and walk around. Then he would come back for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and so on. Cough. Was there something strange mixed in at the end? Jiang Hai wasn't sure, but he liked this kind of life. Jiang Hai's life was really simple. Others lived according to the day, wishing that they could have a new way of living every second. There was no other way, the pressure was too great. They had to hurry up, but Jiang Hai basically lived according to the month. This was because Jiang Hai's matters were basically arranged according to the month. According to his plan for next year. Well, it was only early September this year, but he was already thinking about next year. January was the time to plant seaweed. Since Jiang Hai's manor had more sea areas, naturally, he wanted to increase the spiritual qi in these sea areas. Naturally, seaweed was indispensable. It could be planted in January or December. Jiang Hai estimated that he would start planting it in December this year. In February, it was the time to plant fish food and vegetables. The fish food was the small mullet and octopus larvae. The vegetables were naturally the vegetables to be eaten this year. In the United States, vegetables were much more expensive than meat. In March, it was the time to plant fish fry and fruit. Jiang Hai also planted a lot of fruit in the manor. As for the fish fry, this year, Jiang Hai and Edward Anderson had a discussion. They directly got some good fish fry and raised them. He didn't want to raise American red fish anymore. He wanted to raise some good fish. Atlantic salmon was a must. After all, it was very expensive. The grouper also needed to be raised. Jiang Hai even contacted Porter and Eva. He had to admit that this guy had a few tricks up his sleeve. He even managed to get mouse spots. Mouse spots were called groupers, but in fact, they weren't groupers. They were a kind of humpback bass. They were only distributed in the Western Pacific Ocean, but Porter and Eva had some connections with a fishing company in Hong Kong. Of course, the price was more expensive than in Huaxia, but Jiang Hai didn't care. Jiang Hai had spent a lot of money on Porter and Eva in the past 2 years. This guy was also an enterprising person. Over the years, he had contacted a lot of suppliers outside. Now, he could almost get all the expensive aquatic products. In fact, these expensive aquatic products were prepared for Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai was naturally very happy about this. The last time he went to the pier in Boston, he met with Terry and Eva. He also gave Jiang Hai a list of the fish seedlings that he could get now. Almost all the seedlings that Jiang Hai wanted to get, he had them here. Jiang Hai and Edward Anderson discussed the types of fish fry to buy next year. They were Atlantic salmon, grouper, dragon, mouse spot, spotted shrimp, king crab, geoduck clam, and deep-sea spiny dragon specially imported from Australia. In addition to the fish that Jiang Hai originally had in the sea, Jiang Hai's seafood next year was bound to be abundant. In April, there was originally a beef show, but he had to consider whether to participate next year. In late April and early May, there was a wine show, but Jiang Hai had to consider whether to participate or not. After all, he had been to Europe and so on. Even if he were to participate, he would probably let Dulles Gerard lead the team. In May, June, and July, nothing happened. In early August it was the day to fish for tuna, but he did not fish this year. There were plenty of tuna in his sea, and he was too lazy to fish outside. In late August, the grapes were ripe again. In late August and early September, it was time to harvest the grapes and make wine. However, this had nothing to do with him. Then, around mid-September, he would buy cattle. Jiang Hai had also discussed this with Robbins Garcia. Because the cattle in their manor were basically Angus cattle, Jiang Hai did not buy large beef cattle. Anyway, he was now making money by selling grass. His beef cattle would not exceed 30,000 in the end, so it was quite good. After October, until January of the next year, Jiang Hai would be in a state where nothing happened. Indeed, other people would plan according to the day. What to do today, what to do tomorrow. Jiang Hai planned directly according to the month, and in a year, there would be half a year when he would be in a state of not doing anything. If it was an ordinary person who could not stand being lonely, they would have looked for something to do long ago. Those who could do serious things would do serious things, such as investing, trading in stocks, starting a business. Those who had nothing to do would also look for excitement, pick up girls, go racing, go to nightclubs, travel. Who would be like Jiang Hai, just lying at home like this? It was really boring. But Jiang Hai himself didn't feel bored. This was enough for him. Nowadays, there were more people who were bored than he imagined. In the most popular live broadcast in the country, there were tens of thousands of people watching a live broadcast of someone sleeping. Wasn't this boring enough? Fortunately, Taraga's school found something for Jiang Hai to do. On the morning of September 7th, Jiang Hai and Taraga went to school together. Today was supposed to be a rest day, but almost all the students in the school came because their school had a basketball game, which was quite eye-catching. Naturally, Jiang Hai also came with Taraga. Besides Taraga, almost all the women in Jiang Hai's manor came, including Valentina and Alfred. Only Biliak was still busy in Boston. Fortunately, Jiang Hai had enough cars. Everyone drove over and there was still room for them to sit down. After getting out of the car, Taraga took everyone to visit the school. Only Jiang Hai was pulled to their basketball stadium by their sissy vice principal. Don't get me wrong. Jiang Hai was very straight, straighter than a steel bar. Therefore, he was pulled over just to discuss the game in a while. Jiang Hai didn't care much about it. Instead, it was the high school students from the two school teams who were very nervous. As for whether they had any fantasies or not, Jiang Hai didn't know. Anyway, when he was in high school, he was quite a chinibu. Jiang Hai didn't know. Anyway, when he was in high school, he was quite chinibu. While they were discussing, the NBA star team had already arrived outside the high school by bus. Hey, Paul, it seems that you're quite famous here. Along with the arrival of the bus, many students and people who had heard of the news gathered at the school gate. When they saw the people inside the bus, many of them screamed. Hearing the screams, a big black guy sitting in the bus couldn't help but say to a middle-aged man who was sitting in the front, "Hey, Paul, it seems that you're quite famous here." This middle-aged man was no other than an NBA All-Star player. He was once the top player in Boston, truth Paul Pierce. At this time, he was also waving to the people outside. His reputation in Boston was extremely famous. Although he doesn't play in Boston anymore, his influence in Boston is undeniable. The love for players and teams in the United States and Hua was different. In the United States, everyone liked the team, and then they liked the star of the team. In Hua, everyone liked the star, and then they liked the team. Therefore, generally speaking, if a star player changed teams, it would not cause any waves in Hua. Those who liked him would still like him, and those who disliked him would still dislike him. However, in the United States, generally, a star player changing teams would cause a huge backlash. They would directly burn the jerseys and so on. It was clear that they were quite disgusted with such traitors. However, no one cared whether Paul Pierce was still in Boston or not. When he left, a lot of people were sad, but there were very few people who scolded him because he had given almost 90% of his career to Boston. He had also brought a championship ring with him. At the end of the year, when he left in search of a championship ring, no one cared about that. On the contrary, there were more people who scolded the general manager. Therefore, although he had left, there were still many local supporters. His name was still very famous. This year, like previous years, when he came back to organize the game, there were still many people who responded. "Paul is the symbol here, just like I am in Atlanta." At this time, another black man next to him said with a smile. Hearing his words, many people here could not help but make a tisk sound. "You will be beaten up in Atlanta now, Joseph." Looking at the man in front of him, the black man with the explosive hair said with a smile. "You say it as if you won't be beaten up in Dallas." However, the man named Joseph was not someone to be trifled with. After hearing the black man with the explosive hair, he immediately retorted. The man also curled his lips. He was not going to be stubborn about this. Hearing this, the people in the car could not help but laugh a few times, but they did not comment. "Well, brothers, we are here. Don't embarrass yourself later, understand?" At this moment, the bus also slowly stopped. Paul Pierce, who was sitting at the front, stood up immediately and said to the people in the bus with a hoarse voice. After hearing his words, the people in the bus naturally cheered excitedly. "Okay, get off the bus." Seeing that everyone was in a good state, Paul Pierce was the first to get off the bus. As they began to get off the bus, the security guards hired by the school immediately formed a human wall so that they could walk down safely. The fans waiting in front of the bus couldn't help but scream. Hearing these screams, these people also walked down with a smile. Almost every person who got off the bus would cause the audience to cheer. For them, these guys who appeared on TV were going to perform for them today. For the fans, just thinking about it made them very excited. Chapter 795. Wow, 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 it's really an NBA star. Oh my God, that's Paul Pierce, that's Josh Smith. And Avery Bradley, that's Evan Turner. And Isaiah Thomas, oh, that's DeAndre Jordan. Many of the onlookers were NBA fans, although the NBA was not the most popular among the 4 major leagues in North America. But as long as it was a sport, there would naturally be a lot of fans. The people here all liked basketball. DeAndre Jordan, didn't he make a scene this year? Hearing this, a good friend next to him could not help but whisper. The biggest news of the summer was DeAndre Jordan's departure and return. From a legal point of view, there was nothing wrong with him. But from a moral point of view, he had indeed cheated the Mavericks. Hey, that's all business. Hearing his good friend's words, the person who was scolding Jordan in front of the computer suddenly became his supporter and screamed loudly. The tall and long-armed DeAndre Jordan reached out and high-fived him. He immediately gained another fan. He had to admit that this young man was really easy to buy. "Hello, everyone." Looking at the excited crowd here, Paul Pierce also said loudly. Then he walked forward, waving his hand vigorously, greeting the crowd as he walked into the stadium in the distance. With the arrival of these people, the other players also came. This was a charity game. Although there was no winner and it was a performance, the number of people still had to be gathered. According to the rules of the game, there had to be 10 people on each side. At the same time, there were 3 referees. The referees were naturally found by Paul Pierce. The players were basically all found by him. There were a total of 6 NBA players. 3 of them were Boston Celtics players, Evan Turner, Avery and Bradley, and Isaiah Thomas. These 3 were currently the outside core of the Celtics, but because they were relatively young, they were not very famous. The other 3 were Paul Pierce's teammates on the Clippers. They were him, Josh Smith, and DeAndre Jordan. Normally, all-star level players like Jordan wouldn't participate in a charity match like this. Basically, only some old guys or rookies would participate. The only reason he came was because he was a little blind this summer. Right now, he was trying to gain popularity everywhere. Otherwise, when this year's all-star voting started, he would really be finished. The 6 players were naturally mixed in between the 2 teams. In addition, they also found 4 players who played in the NBDL. With this opportunity to brush up on the good impression of the absolute main force of these teams, these players were also very happy. In addition, there were a few university students and some members of society. However, these members of society obviously knew Paul Pierce. It seemed that they also knew that his skills were not very good. These university students were all local Boston University students. There were many famous universities in Boston, but none of them were famous basketball schools. The only one with some records was Boston College, but that was the NCAA's business. It had nothing to do with Jiang Hai and the others who were far away from their careers. After everyone arrived, Paul Pierce also gathered everyone together and prepared to talk about the teams. But before they could be divided, Avery and Bradley, who had met Jiang Hai a few times, came directly to Jiang Hai's side. "Hey, Paul, I want to be with this guy." Looking at Paul Pierce, Avery and Bradley couldn't help but shout. "What the hell? Do you know each other?" Hearing his words, Paul Pierce frowned and asked with some doubts. "Hey, of course, this is Jiang. He is very famous in Winthrop. Don't look at his young age. He earns more than all of us combined." Hearing Paul Pierce's words, Avery and Bradley couldn't help but say with a smile, "Well, then it's up to you." Hearing Avery and Bradley's words, Paul Pierce shrugged indifferently. In his view, Avery chose to follow Jiang Hai, nothing more than to be more familiar with Jiang Hai. As he said, Jiang Hai is a rich man. When he came in, the vice principal had already introduced Jiang Hai to him. For players like them, there are only benefits and no disadvantages to knowing a rich man. He was also willing to see Bradley with some Jiang Hai, but what he didn't know was that Bradley was actually going to suck up to him. Soon, the 20 people here were divided into teams. On Jiang Hai's side, there were him, Avery and Bradley, Josh Smith, Evan Turner, a high school student, 2 NBDL players, a person from the underworld, and 2 NCAA players, forming a team of 10 people. On the opposite side were Paul Pierce, DeAndre Jordan, and Isaiah Thomas, plus a high school student, 2 people from the underworld, 2 NBDL players, and 2 NCAA players. After the teams were divided, the 2 teams began to study the lineup for the game. At the request of Avery and Bradley, Jiang Hai was arranged to be the starting point guard. He played as the shooting guard, the all-around Evan Turner played as the shooting guard, and he played as the small forward. Josh Smith was the only person on the field who could carry DeAndre Jordan. He could only play as the center, and a big man who looked very handsome in the NCAA played as the power forward. After choosing the players, Jiang Hai and the others also began to practice and familiarize themselves with the rules of the game. Because it was a charity game, both sides had unlimited substitutions and unlimited timeouts. A game was divided into 2 halves, with a 10-minute break in the middle and a 20-minute half. After communicating with the 3 referees, the security guards let out the security guards. The school's security guards also began to let people in. Soon, a lot of people came in. Naturally, the women in Jiang Hai's house also squeezed in. They all piled up behind Jiang Hai's team. Wow, I didn't expect this small place to attract so many beautiful women. So many beautiful women. I'm a little excited. Looking at the beautiful women sitting behind his lineup, the girls from Jiang Hai's family, Josh Smith's eyes suddenly widened. Then he gently elbowed DeAndre Jordan next to him and whispered with a smile. After all, the 2 of them were now on the same team. Their usual relationship was naturally closer than his teammates today, the few Celtics players. It would be another matter during the game later, but for now, they were still together. Hey, they're sitting there to watch my performance. TSK, Josh, you have to remember to get out of the way in a while. Otherwise, don't blame me if you get caught. Looking at the girls over there, DeAndre Jordan deliberately made a muscular gesture. Sure enough, Chi Jia and the others saw it and couldn't help laughing together. In fact, they were laughing at this guy for looking like a fool, but this guy thought that they were attracted to him. Although it may not be good to say this, you're probably going to be disappointed. Those girls are Mr. Zhang's womenfolk. Hearing their words, the high school student from DeAndre Jordan's team came over and said to them. You just said, us? Hearing his words, the 2 people on this side couldn't help but be stunned, and then asked with some doubts. Yeah, they're all in that area. Hearing their words, the high school student gestured. In fact, this matter was not a secret in Winthrop. Everyone knew that the people in Jiang Hai's manor were actually Jiang Hai's mistresses. Damn, evil tycoon, doesn't he know that bigamy is illegal in the United States? Hearing the high school student's words, little Jordan couldn't help but curse. He was originally prepared to perform well in a while and see if he could take one away tonight. Now, the famous girl is taken. Of course, he didn't think about the problem of loosening the soil. If it was in Los Angeles, maybe he would have the courage to steal, but where is this? This is Winthrop, and Jiang Hai is the richest man in Winthrop. He doesn't believe that if he dares to mess around, he will be able to get on the plane back to Los Angeles tomorrow. The problem is that the strong dragon can't suppress the local snake. The problem is that he is talking about the strong dragon. His little Jordan is just a little frog. When the frog meets the snake, it just prays that the snake ignores it. How dare he take the initiative to show off? Although he looks big and tall, in fact, this guy's brain is still very good. Otherwise, his shadow would not be everywhere this summer, but it is inevitable that he is unhappy. In a while, I'll give him a few good shots to vent my anger. Hearing little Jordan's muttering, Josh Smith was also helpless. He thought that these girls were here to see him, but now it seems that they are here to see Jiang Hai. Chapter 796. Josh Smith, when he was young, was known as Little Howard, in terms of physical fitness. When he first entered the league, he was a famous jumper. His physical fitness was very strong, but his offense was quite unstable. However, his defensive and blocking abilities were quite outstanding when he was young. He still held the record of being the youngest player in the NBA to block 10 shots in a game. In addition, he was also the youngest player to block 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, and 1,000 shots. He was the 2005 Slam Dunk champion, the 2005 Best Rookie, and the 2009 Best Defensive Team. It could be said that he had the strength of an all-star, but he had never been on the all-star team. His best days were when he was with the Hawks. At that time, he was ranked among the best in the entire league. His defensive ability, strong physical fitness, and shooting range that extended beyond the three-point line were quite outstanding. However, it was a pity that his offense was quite unstable. It was sometimes good and sometimes bad. As he grew older, his physical fitness deteriorated, and his ability continued to decline. However, when he was with the Rockets last year, he suddenly broke out in the Western Conference semifinals. When the Clippers were leading 3-1, he helped the Rockets win 3 games in a row. In the end, he did not let Paul touch the floor of Western Conference. Although he quickly disappeared after entering the finals of the Western Conference, his reputation had spread far and wide. This year, the Clippers recruited him. Together with Paul Pierce, they wanted to compete for the championship. Because he was a new addition, he got along well with Paul Pierce on the team. In addition, there were some problems with his attitude when he played, especially when it came to training. Therefore, when Paul Pierce said that he was going to play in the charity game, he came. Besides him, the only other person on the Clippers who came with him was Little Jordan, who was eager to increase his reputation. However, even after saying so many good things about Josh, it did not change the fact that he could not beat Little Jordan. In the air, Little Jordan flicked his wrist and sent the basketball to his side. Although Isaiah Thomas was used more as a sixth man in the previous seasons, in this year's playoffs, he proved his strength. He averaged 17.5 points, 7 assists, and 3 rebounds per game. He proved to the world that his name was not for nothing. According to Boston, he should be the starting point guard of the team next year. At that time, his stats would explode again. Of course, with Boston's defense-oriented attitude, even if it exploded, it wouldn't blow up much. However, there was no doubt about his strength. He stepped forward and prepared to receive the ball. However, just as he was about to receive the ball, a figure suddenly flashed in front of him. Then, the ball disappeared. What? Isaiah Thomas reacted quickly and immediately looked at the person running away. That person was none other than Jiang Hai. He only saw that Jiang Hai, who stole the ball at this time, was chewing gum while running quickly to the opponent's basket. After all, it was the first ball. Isaiah Thomas gave up after thinking for a while. After watching Jiang Hai rush directly to the opponent's half of the court and cross the three-point line, Jiang Hai received the ball. 1 step, 2 steps. Jiang Hai stepped on the free throw line and flew up. In the surprised eyes of the audience, he slammed the ball into the basket like a tomahawk. Wow, my God, what did I see? A tomahawk at the free throw line? The person who did this is Jiang Hai? A manor owner? Looking at Jiang Hai, who landed on the ground, many people on the sidelines exclaimed loudly. They did not expect Jiang Hai to be so strong. The people on the court were also a little stunned. They all looked at Jiang Hai with surprise. They did not expect that Jiang Hai's first shot would be like this. It really surprised them. In the United States, there were many people who could jump from the free throw line, but there were not many Asians who could jump from the free throw line. Let's continue. However, there were also 2 people on the court who were very clear about Jiang Hai's strength. They were Avery Bradley and Evan Turner, who had seen Jiang Hai's power. They knew that Jiang Hai was just warming up, so they smiled and said to each other, "Let's continue." Looking at their annoying faces, Paul Pierce frowned and said loudly. Hearing Paul Pierce's words, everyone here began to get busy. The high school player first went back to pass the ball to Isaiah Thomas and then ran to the opponent's half of the court. After Isaiah Thomas dribbled the ball across the half of the court, he saw Jiang Hai in front of him. The 2 of them were facing each other, but in his eyes, Jiang Hai at this time was really full of loopholes. He stood so casually in front of him. He did not stand in a triple threat position, nor did he stand in a defensive position. He just stood there casually. It could be seen that Jiang Hai should be a layman. Although he had strong physical fitness, Isaiah Thomas did not care. After quickly dribbling the ball in his hands a few times, he made 2 feints. Then he stepped on the ground and sprinted. He wanted to use the change of rhythm and his own strong explosive power to pass Jiang Hai. Unfortunately, he still underestimated Jiang Hai. When he finally exerted his strength, Jiang Hai was already standing in front of him perfectly. He directly bumped into Jiang Hai's body. It was not an exaggeration to say that Jiang Hai's body was humanoid steel. This collision almost stunned Isaiah Thomas. He subconsciously took 2 steps back, but this retreat revealed the ball he was protecting. Jiang Hai went up and said nothing. He directly took out the ball, and the ball was in his hands in an instant. Isaiah Thomas immediately yelled for defense when he felt the ball being thrown away. Then, everyone quickly ran back. But when they ran in place, they found that Jiang Hai was still dribbling the ball. Josh Smith and the player were also a little confused. Looking at Jiang Hai, they did not know what the richest man in Winthrop was doing. Only Avery Bradley and Evan Turner knew, and they were also strolling there leisurely. Seeing that the people on the other side were already in position, Jiang Hai glanced at the referee beside him who was still counting down the seconds. The 8-second time limit was half-time, and now there were already 6 seconds. Looking at the referee, Jiang Hai passed the ball to his right hand and casually threw it. The basketball flew out like a cannonball. In about a second, the basketball directly hit the inside of the basket and bounced into the net. The moment the basketball hit the net, the whole stadium was silent. This is a shot. In the audience, many people who knew basketball were confused. At this time, Jiang Hai was standing near the center circle in his own half of the court. In other words, he did not jump, nor did he use his hands. He threw the ball with one hand and it went in. When did basketball become such a sport? They really did not understand, and at the same time, they were dumbfounded. But that did not stop them from immediately taking out their phones and starting to record the game on the court. Their sixth sense told them that this game was going to explode. He's become stronger again. Looking at Jiang Hai, Avery Bradley's eyes were shining. He thought that if his team signed Jiang Hai, then his team would be the champion this year. No, any team that signed Jiang Hai would be the champion, but it was impossible for them to sign Jiang Hai, because Jiang Hai did not lack their money. Let's continue. Evan Turner patted Avery Bradley's shoulder. He saw more clearly than he did. Jiang Hai could not join an NBA team because he did not need glory or money. So he was more open-minded and shouted to the people in front of him. Hearing his words, the people here looked at each other. Jordan took a deep breath and passed the ball. Now, when they looked at Jiang Hai again, they felt strange. Was this guy really that strong? Isaiah Thomas was definitely not satisfied. In a charity match like this, he had been beaten twice in a row. Especially the second goal, which was scored with an almost insulting style of play. He was definitely not happy. So when the ball started again, he went to find Jiang Hai again. He wanted revenge. Paul Pierce and the others also pulled apart, indicating that he would play a single. Phew. Isaiah Thomas took a deep breath. The basketball was like a fairy, constantly dancing on his fingertips. The sound of the basketball hitting the floor was also transmitted to everyone's ears. In front of him, Jiang Hai just stood there calmly. The defense was originally full of holes, but for some reason, Isaiah Thomas felt a little weak. He did not dare to break through. Maybe it was because of the momentum just now, or maybe it was because of Jiang Hai's momentum. But after all, he was going to be a star player of a team next season. His heart was unusually big. Although the atmosphere was a little suffocating, he still decided to challenge himself. With a shout, he was ready to break through in an instant. After a huge change in front of his body, he broke through to Jiang Hai's left side. Seeing his movement, Jiang Hai also moved a step to the left. At this moment, he suddenly changed direction. His ankle was almost broken. He pulled the ball and his center of gravity to the right side. Then, to prevent Jiang Hai from following, he also turned around. Seeing his movement, the people on the court who knew basketball could not help but have their eyes lit up. The crossover, the cross step, was a small person's passing skill that Allen Iverson carried forward. Hua Xia also translated it as the butterfly step through flowers. Now, Isaiah Thomas's movement had almost reached 80% of Allen Iverson's level in his heyday. No one in the league could defend against this pass. In their view, Jiang Hai would definitely be passed this time. The only people who still had confidence in Jiang Hai were Avery Bradley and Evan Turner. Sure enough, just as Isaiah Thomas almost risked his injury to make such a pass, he still could not pass Jiang Hai. And most importantly, he lost the ball. Because Jiang Hai came to his side without him knowing. The moment he turned around, Jiang Hai's hand also stretched out. It was unusually clean. He grabbed the ball that bounced from the ground into his hand and then casually threw it to Evan Turner. Playing basketball, he could not just play by himself, right? At the same time, he also slowly walked to the opponent's half of the court. Evan Turner also expressed his understanding and immediately pushed the ball across the half of the court. The opponent's defense was not slow. They stood in position immediately, and Jiang Hai was still slowly strolling toward the inside. At this time, Paul Pierce and the others were guarding a joint defense. This was originally to deal with Josh Smith because Jordan could not defend against him. But this time, it saved Isaiah Thomas because he did not need to match up with Jiang Hai. He just watched Jiang Hai walk to the three-point line. When he walked to the free throw line, he pointed up. Want to pass? No way. Seeing Jiang Hai's movement, DeAndre Jordan, who was once called the representative of the city of passing, naturally knew what Jiang Hai was going to do. Jiang Hai's two attacks just now had almost destroyed their newspaper. If Jiang Hai still played a passing game now, they would not be able to continue playing. So at the moment, he also secretly shouted and directly gave up on the inside line and rushed out. Evan Turner, who had full confidence in Jiang Hai, naturally would not disappoint Jiang Hai's expectations. In an instant, he directly passed an alley-oop ball from outside the three-point line. Seeing the ball coming, Jiang Hai also ran toward the inside line. For a moment, Jiang Hai and DeAndre Jordan rushed toward the ball together. When they were about 2 meters away from the basket, DeAndre Jordan also jumped up instantly. He felt that in this position, he could intercept the ball. While he jumped, he was still looking at Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai did not intend to jump. He even took an extra step forward. Seeing this, DeAndre Jordan could not help but laugh disdainfully. This guy is indeed a little strange, but no matter how strange he is just a layman. If he jumps at this time, how can he jump higher than me? Seeing that he was getting higher and higher, and the basketball was getting closer and closer to him, at this moment, suddenly, a figure appeared in front of him. No one thought that Jiang Hai's speed could be so fast. Even though he was one step behind, he was still in front of little Jordan. And when little Jordan stopped in the air, Jiang Hai was still in the air. With a soft snap, Jiang Hai's left hand caught the basketball in the air first. Then he turned directly in the air and wanted to dunk. Looking at Jiang Hai's indifferent look, little Jordan's forehead could not help but break out in a cold sweat. He had an ominous feeling, but at this time, he was still in the air and could not avoid it. He could only grit his teeth and fiercely pounce. This ball must not be scored by Jiang Hai. But just as he was about to pounce on Jiang Hai stretched out his empty right hand and gently pushed DeAndre Jordan in the air. DeAndre Jordan felt his forward momentum suddenly stagnate. Then he was horrified to find that Jiang Hai was flying backward with him. In everyone's surprised eyes, Jiang Hai's chin was above the basket. His right hand suddenly dunked the ball directly into the basket. Chapter 797. Bang! 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 Hua! 4 sounds rang out in succession. The first was the sound of Jiang Hai smashing the basketball into the basket. the second was the sound of little Jordan landing on the ground, the third was the sound of him hitting the basketball rack directly, and the fourth was the sound of Jiang Hai smashing the backboard into pieces. After the 4 sounds, everyone was stunned and dumbfounded. Everyone's eyes were focused on Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai was still hanging on the basket, chewing gum very calmly. It was as if he had just completed a very ordinary layup. He was not surprised at all. "Oh, my God, my God. My God, what did I just see?" Another person besides Shaq to break a rebound in a game. "My God, my God. Oh, my God," countless people looked at Jiang Hai. Everyone did not understand how Jiang Hai's body, which did not seem very strong, had such powerful strength. And these people's voices also shocked everyone on the court. Paul Pierce and Josh Smith ran in front of little Jordan immediately. They knew that little Jordan was only there to gain reputation. If he was injured, they would not be able to bear the consequences when they went back. But they deliberately bypassed Jiang Hai. First, it was because Jiang Hai was the local bully, and there was no conflict. Second, it was because of the kind of momentum that Jiang Hai exuded, which made them not dare to approach him. This guy was too ferocious. Little Jordan was also very confused at this time, but he did not have any intention of getting angry. First, it was because this was Jiang Hai's territory. Second, it was also because Jiang Hai's action just now was very clean. There was no additional force in the air. He directly used his own bounce speed, suspension, and strength to forcefully push over, which made him completely confused. How could a yellow-skinned person have such a strong body? How could he? He could only look up at Jiang Hai. Then, with the help of Paul Pierce and Josh Smith, he stood up. The vice principal on the sidelines also sent his own cleaning staff to clean up the broken glass plates. Since the 1990s, no one had broken glass panels because the glass was made of plexiglass, which meant that it was like the front windshield of a car. After it was broken, it would become a crack, but it wouldn't fall off. It was still a hole. Jiang Hai wasn't sure what was added to the glass, but it basically wouldn't break. However, Jiang Hai had broken it today. It could only be said that this piece of glass was too fragile. Fortunately, there were still a lot of backboards in the basketball court. After the referee stopped the game, the staff went to change the backboards. Jiang Hai and the others returned to their respective resting areas and sat there to rest. "Be gentle. Aren't you afraid that that thing will break and stab others?" As soon as Jiang Hai sat down, Feng Yunshan, who was sitting behind him, patted Jiang Hai on the shoulder and said with a smile. Listening to her deliberately loud words, Jiang Hai also smiled. This little Ni really likes to show off. In fact, she was now more of a declaration of sovereignty, representing that Jiang Hai was her family. Look at how powerful our Jiang Hai is. Jiang Hai didn't care about this and just smiled there. You really should pay more attention. If you really break the backboard, then you can't play anymore. At this time, Avery Bradley also came over with a smile and said to Jiang Hai. It was obvious that he was in a good mood. Evan Turner, who was next to him, also laughed. This game was really interesting. On the other hand, Josh Smith looked at the other side with some worry. After all, little Jordan was his teammate. If he was really broken by Jiang Hai, then it would be troublesome. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's actions just now were not harmful. Although little Jordan fell, this kind of fall would not cause any problems for an NBA player. Look at AI and Wade. Which one of them didn't fall 8 or 10 times in a game? They all learned how to fall without pain or injury. This was also a kind of skill. Although little Jordan's head was in a daze, he still subconsciously used this kind of skill when he fell. The fall really didn't hurt, and he didn't get injured. If you entered the NBA, I don't know if it would be a disaster or a blessing for professional basketball. But fortunately, you didn't go. Looking at little Jordan and the others, who still had lingering fears, Bradley also said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but roll his eyes. He refused to talk about the NBA because it was impossible for him to play in this kind of thing. Now, it was a good choice to occasionally abuse them. Soon, the backboard was changed. Jiang Hai and the others also looked at each other and came to the court again. Jiang Hai, come on. Seeing that Jiang Hai was going to play again, the girls in the audience shouted excitedly. Look, I'm not only going to go to heaven, I'm also going to stand side by side with the sun. Hearing the shouts of the girls, Jiang Hai gave them a thumbs up and said with a smile on his face. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, everyone who knew about this joke couldn't help but laugh. At this time, the score on the court was 7-0. Although the gap didn't seem to be big, Paul Pierce and the others were clearly a little discouraged, especially little Jordan and Isaiah Thomas. They were a little afraid of Jiang Hai. After Isaiah Thomas passed half the court, he directly threw the basketball to Paul Pierce. Uncle Pi could be said to be the only person who was not affected, so let him play. Pierce was playing as a power forward today. After receiving the ball, he played solo against the NBDL player. His experience, his strength, and his weight allowed him to easily play against people who were much worse than him. After a few shots, he changed his rhythm very slowly and slipped into the lane. After all, this was an exhibition game, so Joseph didn't seriously defend and easily moved aside. After Jiang Hai looked, he also decided to play one. Just like that, Paul Pierce easily made a layup and scored the ball, scoring their team's first point. Then Jiang Hai and the others advanced, but this time, Jiang Hai didn't do it himself. It was quite boring to play all by himself. After dribbling the ball for half the court, looking at the nervous Isaiah Thomas in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled and passed the ball to Evan Turner. Evan Turner was originally chosen by the 76ers to be the core of the team. Although from a later point of view, he was a poor version of Iguodala and was indeed not a good candidate to be the team's soul. Iguodala was a poor version of LeBron James, and he was a poor version of Iguodala. Although he was all around, it also meant that he couldn't do anything. At least he was not like Iguodala, who was the best at defense. He was not the best at anything. However, such a person was also very annoying, because when he wanted to attack, he knew everything, and it was really not easy to defend. Especially his opponent, who was an NBA player, was easily swept into the paint by him. Little Jordan was also released at this time, allowing him to complete a dunk and end the attack. When Pierce's team organized another attack, Isaiah Thomas calmed down after a round of rest. He wanted to do it himself this time, but the problem was that Jiang Hai was guarding against him, and he was indeed a little nervous. So he gave little Jordan a look in the paint, and little Jordan immediately pulled out a pick and roll. Jiang Hai did not forcibly push him away, but took advantage of the situation to let Isaiah Thomas enter the paint. Joseph had no problem defending against pick and rolls. After all, he was also known to be a man who could defend 5 positions. Although his pace was now slow, it was not particularly slow. At least he could still keep up with Isaiah Thomas's pace. However, when a guard played inside the paint, as long as he moved out of position, he could shoot. It was easy for Isaiah Thomas to move out of position, but when he saw Jiang Hai not far from him, he was a little nervous. He did not dare to shoot himself. He just happened to see little Jordan running inside the paint after the pick and roll. He could not help but think of a plan. In fact, little Jordan's actions were subconscious. When he was with the Clippers, he was mainly a threat on the offensive end. There were only 2 points. One was the offense under the basket and the second point was the cut after the pick and roll. He did not need to attack from the low post. He did not have the ability to attack, and he did not have the player. In the Clippers, the one who controlled the rhythm was Chris Paul. The offensive knife was Blake Griffin. His main role was to defend, and the offensive side was to slam dunk. So, this time, after the pick and roll, he subconsciously walked inside the paint, which happened to be seen by Isaiah Thomas. Although little Thomas should be considered an offensive guard, he was still a point guard. His strength was still there. As soon as he saw little Jordan walk inside, he immediately made a high-profile move. This meant that he was going to take the free pass. Seeing the basketball flying in the air and in a good position, little Jordan was stunned for a moment. Then, he was ecstatic. He instantly ran 2 steps forward and then jumped. He grabbed the basketball immediately and was about to slam dunk. However, at that moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Little Jordan was stunned. The figure's right hand slammed into the middle of the basketball. Jiang Hai. Feeling the huge force in his hand, little Jordan's eyes were working well. He saw who the person in front of him was at a glance. He thought for a moment. Although he was a little hesitant, he knew that if he forced it, he would probably be overpowered. Instead of that, it was better to hold back a little to prevent himself from getting hurt. Sure enough, his idea was correct. Because just as he was about to hold back, Jiang Hai's power erupted. He did not give him a chance to resist. The basketball was sent flying. Fortunately, he had already held back. Otherwise, he would have been easily injured. Chapter 798. Bro, this is just a charity game. You don't play in the NBA. Don't be so nervous. Relax, relax. The basketball was swatted away and was caught by the high school player on Pierce's team. Then, with no one guarding the court, he scored the ball and scored 2 points. After landing, little Jordan looked at Jiang Hai with some brilliance, and said with a little bit of a smile, "What a joke." "Oh, I wasn't serious." "Okay, I'll hold back a little." Looking at little Jordan, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Then, he muttered to himself and said slowly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, many people around him felt a little nervous. "You weren't serious? What else do you want? Do you want to go to heaven?" When the game started again, Jiang Hai also started to go easy on his teammates. He only defended against his own defenders. He didn't defend too much. As for his offense, it was no longer as sharp as before, unless the 30 seconds of attack time was almost up. Otherwise, he kept getting assists. Maybe he felt that Jiang Hai didn't want the game to end so soon. So, his teammates stopped passing the ball back to him. Basically, they played on their own. For a while, the game was much more interesting. Unknowingly, the time had reached 8 minutes. After Paul Pierce committed a foul, the referee called for an official timeout. The two sides were ready to switch players. At this time, the score was 35-21. Jiang Hai's team was leading by 14 points. Jiang Hai had 13 points, 7 assists, 2 blocks, 3 steals, and 5 rebounds in 8 minutes. This kind of result was really a little speechless. This was because Jiang Hai kept passing the ball. If he wanted to score, of course, if he directly killed the game, it would be meaningless. At least, he didn't want to do that. When the 8 minutes were up, Jiang Hai's team had 4 people on the court. Except for Evante, who continued to control the rhythm of the game, everyone else left the game. The opposite team was the same. Only Paul Pierce, who was making free throws, was left. After that, it could be seen that the competition on the field had become more lively than before, but the viewing value had plummeted. Regardless of whether they were amateurs, university students, high school students, or NBDL players, their standards were indeed lacking. However, the situation in the stadium was rather heated. Everyone could not break through, and neither could they. In the end, they still had to rely on Evan Turner and Paul Pierce to score. After about 3 minutes, Grandpa Pai went off to rest. After all, he was old. The new player, Isaiah Thomas, might have been a little depressed by Jiang Hai's 8 minutes of playing. When he got on the court, he showed his prowess. His ability as an NBA offensive guard was on full display. Isaiah Thomas was very short. He was small and short. Because of this, when he first entered the league, no one was optimistic about him. It could be seen from his draft position. He was the 30th pick in the second round and the last to enter the NBA. However, he did not disappoint. Although he was the last to enter, his offensive ability was gradually displayed. When he was with the Kings, he was the sharpest sixth player. After he joined the Boston Celtics, his offensive ability was infinitely magnified. At this time, he was naturally the strongest one on the court. The player opposite him was an NBDL player. Originally, in the NBDL league, his ability was very good. He averaged more than 20 points and 7 or 8 assists per game. However, at this time, he was completely destroyed by Isaiah Thomas in front of him. Not only was he unable to defend against the offense, breakthroughs, shots, and three-pointers, but Isaiah Thomas also did quite well on the defensive side. Although he was too short and could not defend against the opponent's shots, his mobile defense on the ground was quite good. Under his attack, the score was slowly pulled back. With 3 minutes left in the first half, the score was only 2 points. One goal would be enough to catch up and even surpass. At this time, Avery Bradley called a timeout and replaced the substitutes with him and Jiang Hai. When Jiang Hai came on the court again, the audience on the sidelines reached a limit and cheered loudly. "Hey, man, look, the score is back." Listening to the cheers, Isaiah Thomas, who had scored more than 10 points in a row, smiled and raised his eyebrows at Jiang Hai. "It's open now." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai then received the ball from Bradley. Then, at his own three-point line, he threw it with his right hand. Yes, it was not a shot, but a throw. Just like that, the basketball hit the inside of the basket and bounced into the basket with 2 consecutive sounds of peng and schwa. Wow! It's here again. Can't we play properly? What is this? Is this a shot? Looking at Jiang Hai's ball again, the audience could not help but shout. Isaiah Thomas on the opposite side licked his lips. He was a little overwhelmed. Jiang Hai just glanced at him indifferently. For him, this was no big deal. You dare to provoke him? Your courage is commendable, but don't think about winning this game. Think about how to play well. Looking at Isaiah Thomas, who was walking back to serve the ball, DeAndre Jordan had already given up. Faced with such a humanoid monster, it was better for them to play recreational basketball. The only thing to be thankful for was that he would not play professionally. Sigh, that's the only way. With a sigh, Isaiah Thomas curled his lips and said. Although he was a little unwilling, he really had no way to win against Jiang Hai in front of him. Although Isaiah Thomas admitted defeat, Jiang Hai did not know this. He thought he was going to explode. So in the next attack, Isaiah Thomas was going to pass the ball, but it was instantly snatched by Jiang Hai. Then he was like a wild dog that had escaped its leash. He rushed toward the opponent's half of the court. Then, under everyone's surprised eyes, Jiang Hai stepped about 10 centimeters outside the three-point line and flew. Yes, he flew. He flew into the inside of the three-point line. In front of the audience's jaws that were about to hit the soles of their feet, a tomahawk-style slam dunk hit the basketball into the basket. When the basketball fell to the ground, the audience was silent again. The Chinese flying man will show you what a tomahawk from the three-point line is. Where is the limit of human beings? Where is the limit of Chinese people? The invincible Chinese street ball king dominates the NBA. Let me tell you a joke, Chinese people can't make good guards. Look, I'm still quite handsome on camera. Looking at the news reported by a lot of American media and Huaxia media, Jiang Hai said to Qi Jia with a smile. When she heard Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jia could not help but roll her eyes at him. This guy was really shameless, but her eyes still looked at the collection on Jiang Hai's laptop. This was what those people had recorded when Jiang Hai had participated in the competition that day. Then, they had edited it and added the accompanying music. It really wasn't an ordinary kind of firework. Those titles just now were the titles of Jiang Hai's highlights on various major forums. In fact, when this collection was first released, she had watched it more than 10 times. When she thought that the man in the video was her man, her heart was also very happy. Coupled with the music of Remember the Name, it was really very exciting. In the video, Jiang Hai was omnipotent. He got up and made a slam dunk, suppressed DeAndre Jordan, and continuously stole Isaiah Thomas. He had infinite vision and passed the ball from behind. He stood domineeringly outside the three-point line and waved his hand to throw the ball in. Coupled with the tomahawk from the three-point line, the music and the video really ignited the whole world. As soon as the video came out, it caused a lot of sensation on the internet. On YouTube 13, there were hundreds of thousands of views overnight. However, many people who were watching the show wondered if this was a stunt or if it was done with a computer. Immediately, many people proved that this was true. They also released a lot of original tapes, which were the original tapes of Jiang Hai's game. Looking at the original tapes, these people were even more confused. How could there be such a strong person on Earth? There were even people who linked to Paul Pierce, DeAndre Jordan, Josh Smith, Isaiah Thomas, Avery Bradley, and Evan Turner's tweets, asking if this was real or if they had filmed it. However, these people all gave a reply and said that they must be real. That's why they agreed to compete with Jiang Hai. Only Evan Turner and Avery Bradley were somewhat gloating. Josh Smith was even more generous and said that this was the easiest game he had ever played. The only pity was that Jiang Hai was not an NBA player. Otherwise, he would rather spend money to be on the same team as Jiang Hai. The people who were watching the show were a little confused about these people's comments. The video went viral on this side of the ocean and also spread to Huaxia on the other side of the ocean. Many people in Huaxia knew about Jiang Hai overnight. Although they did not know what Jiang Hai's name was and where he lived, they knew that there was someone who could be so strong among the Chinese. His strength was somewhat inexplicable. How could he make a slam dunk from the three-point line? There were even some CBA players who did not repost the video, but their point of view was that it was done by the computer because it was impossible for people to do this. Of course, they were actually telling the truth. It was impossible for people to do this. But the problem was that Jiang Hai was not an ordinary person. How could they understand the strength of Jiang Hai? After watching the highlights happily, Jiang Hai asked Qi Jia with a smile, "I'm now an internet celebrity." Although all he got in return was a supercilious look, Jiang Hai smiled happily. Although it was troublesome for him to participate in the competition, there were still benefits for him. At least, it made him very happy. In fact, the benefits he got were far more than that. Didn't you have an appointment with Mr. Pierce and the others for dinner today? It's already 3:00. At this moment, Chia came from the side and looked at Jiang Hai, who was still nestled on the sofa, and could not help but ask with some doubts. Chapter 799. Sorry. I'm late. Looking at Paul Pierce, DeAndre Jordan, Josh Smith, Avery Bradley, Evan Turner, and Isaiah Thomas in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled and said to them. This was a private party. After the game that day, Jiang Hai had also attended the party they had organized. After the party, these people had gotten to know each other through fighting. Moreover, Jiang Hai had such strength in the event that they were best at, so these people were very interested in Jiang Hai. After the party that night, they had specially invited Jiang Hai to get together again. However, this was a private party. After today's party, they would return to their respective teams to prepare for tomorrow's game. Among these people, Avery Bradley admired Jiang Hai the most. Isaiah Thomas and DeAndre Jordan feared Jiang Hai the most. There was no other way. After that game, they had really lost their confidence. They believed that if Jiang Hai said that he wanted to play professionally, then he would become the benchmark of this era. Just like Jordan, it was a tragedy to be born in the same era as him. Of course, Jiang Hai was much better than Jordan. However, Jiang Hai did not care about the salary of the NBA. What a joke. An NBA player had to play so many games a year. They started training in mid-September, the preseason game in October, the official game in November, and all the way until mid-April last year. It was fine if they did not make it to the playoffs. They only played 82 games in the regular season and rested after that. Even if they made it to the playoffs, they still had to play in the playoffs. If they were really not careful and made it to the finals, they would have to wait until June to finish. After the end of June, there was less than 3 months of rest before the new season. Perhaps for the fans, these few months of rest would be difficult, but for Jiang Hai, he would not put his energy and time into games. If he had the time, it would be better to lie at home and watch others play. It was quite interesting. They knew that Jiang Hai did not care about the small amount of money from playing NBA stars, so Paul Pierce and the others were very happy to make friends with him. After all, these people were his idols, so Jiang Hai was also very happy to make friends with them. That was why today's meeting was held. However, Jiang Hai was not in a hurry. When he arrived, although it was still on time, the others had already arrived. It's okay. We have been practicing by ourselves these past few days, so it's not strange that we all came together. Let's go. Let's go out and play. I haven't played in Boston for a while. Seeing that Jiang Hai had also come over, Paul Pierce spoke with a hoarse voice with a smile. Paul Pierce should be one of the favorite stars in the NBA. The reason why he earned his nickname was because he went to a place where he shouldn't have gone to. As a result, he was stabbed 11 times. However, he didn't die or become crippled. Instead, he became stronger and stronger. He had to admit that the human body was indeed a wonderful thing. However, although he liked to play, he wouldn't be photographed often. He still paid more attention to the time and place. Unlike the nightclubs, he was somewhat addicted to this kind of thing. Regardless of whether he was in a competition or not, he would still go to nightclubs. This was also his habit. Today was the off-season, so it did not matter whether he went to play or not. Then let's go. Although Jiang Hai did not know where they were asking him to go, looking at their green eyes, Jiang Hai knew that they were definitely not going to a good place. But to be honest, he really did not know what fun places there were in Boston. The educational atmosphere here was so strong that there were no nightclubs in the city. The atmosphere was not very good. Of course, Jiang Hai himself did not like nightclubs. Because he felt that they were too noisy, but it was inevitable that it would be strange, especially since he had been to New York. However, Paul Pierce was an old local here. He knew these places very well. In fact, in the city of Boston, there were indeed no nightclubs. This was also not in line with the academic atmosphere here. Therefore, the Massachusetts government and the Boston City Council would not allow such a place to exist. But people also needed to vent, especially in the United States. Those white-collar workers, students, and the like also needed to go there to play. If there was a demand, there would be a supply. Therefore, there were still such places in Massachusetts. Jiang Hai followed Paul Pierce. Not long after, they came to a block that did not seem very conspicuous, but after entering it, he found that it was a different world. In this block, almost the entire street was filled with bars and nightclubs. Now that it was dark, there were not many people. After all, Paul Pierce and the others were also public figures, so it was inevitable for them to come when there were fewer people. According to Paul Pierce, it was very safe to come here to play. First of all, 90% of the people playing here were students. Students meant that they wouldn't easily encounter badger games, wine stalls, or get into trouble. Second, there were not many students who dared to play games. They did not have to be too careful when drinking. For example, athletes usually had to be very careful when eating and drinking, because some drugs and the like were absolutely not to be touched. They were still very self-disciplined. If they were caught by the police, it would be fine. But if they failed a urine test, it would be interesting. These guys' careers might be over. Jiang Hai drove and followed Paul Pierce's car slowly. Although these guys came together, each of them drove a car. This was also because if they wanted to take someone away later, they would not be able to take anyone away if they were crowded in one car. With Paul Pierce at the front, it did not take long for these people to come to the back door of a bar. After parking the car, Jiang Hai and the others also got out of the car in turn. There was a big black man waiting here for a long time. "Hey, Paul, how have you been?" Seeing Paul Pierce coming over, the big man over there said with a smile. "Not bad, how about you?" "Man." Hearing his words, Paul Pierce also said with a smile. "I'm still the same. After all, I work for others." Shrugging, the man said helplessly. Indeed, for him, there was no difference. After Paul Pierce heard this, he smiled and took out a franc from his pocket and stuffed it into the man's pocket. Then the man laughed instantly. "Come on, let's go in." Then the man did not talk nonsense. He directly took out a stamp and prepared to stamp Jiang Hai's wrists. This was also an anti-underage mark in American bars. In the United States, at the age of 18, no, 16, you could go to a nightclub, but the standard for drinking in the United States was 21 years old. In such bars or nightclubs in the United States, before entering, you would be asked to show your ID card, and then such a stamp would be stamped. If you were under 21 years old, you could only drink in the bar. If you were full, you could drink. Jiang Hai and the others were naturally full and dissatisfied. For the sake of Franklin, they were full. Then they went straight into the bar. Walking into the bar, Jiang Hai and the others found that there were not many people in the bar at this time. The DJ was still adjusting the equipment, and the waiters were still digging the floor and glasses. Only a few children, who looked like high school students, came in with curiosity and looked around the nightclub. Seeing people, Paul Pierce and the others all hid in the darkness, and then took the side road and went straight to a box on the second floor. The door of this box was open to the outside. They could see the dance floor outside and feel the atmosphere there, but it was not too noisy. The box was big enough. There were not only sofas, separate bar counters, and even a billiard table. This was a snooker table. Jiang Hai had seen it before, but he had never played it. He was not interested in it. Jiang Hai used to like sports. When he was young, he liked football. Later, he liked basketball. For a period of time, he also liked tennis. He also played bowling and volleyball. But the only thing he didn't know how to play was two balls. One was the national ball of Huaxia, and the other was billiards. He was not very interested in it. Seeing that Jiang Hai was not very interested in it, Evan Turner and Josh Smith went to play first. Jiang Hai and the others sat on the sofa. Then Paul Pierce took the drink list and handed it to Jiang Hai. "I don't really know how to drink these things. Just give me some Budweiser." Shaking his head, Jiang Hai really did not know much about these things. He liked beer. Foreign wine and red wine were not his cup of tea. "All right. Give me 4 bottles of Martell Blue, a bottle of Baiweiss, and a bartender. You can decide who you want." Seeing that Jiang Hai did not order, the others followed his lead. Paul Pierce also smiled. He was also a regular customer here, so he naturally knew what to order. He said casually. The waiter who led them in also smiled and left. Not long after, a woman in a woman's suit came in with a few waiters. To be honest, the woman in a woman's suit didn't look young. She was about 30 years old, but she looked pretty good. After entering the bar, she nodded indifferently to Jiang Hai. Paul Pierce waved his hand and she walked into the bar. She was Jiang Hai's bartender today. Chapter 800. The waiters were here to deliver the drinks. After the drinks were placed, there were also some fruit platters and the like. These were all gifts for Paul Pierce. After delivering the drinks, the female bartender also inquired about their situation. After confirming their tastes, the female bartender first made a few glasses of apéritif. The so-called apéritif was similar to an appetizer. It was also called an apéritif, which often appeared in Western food. However, this wine was similar to hangover medicine. It was drunk before drinking. Firstly, it was to protect the stomach. Secondly, it was to allow the body to adapt to the alcohol in advance. This way, the body wouldn't pull the shuttle and wouldn't get hurt. Paul Pierce and the others were experts in these things. Of course, Jiang Hai would not understand these things. Soon, a few glasses of sweet and sour apéritif were made. Jiang Hai and the others also drank 2 glasses each. After drinking, they needed some time to adapt to the alcohol, so they were still playing on their own. The youngest among them, Avery Bradley, had already brought Isaiah Thomas, the second youngest of the preparation group, to the window, ready to look for prey. Josh Smith and Evan Turner were still playing at the table. DeAndre Jordan was probably afraid that 2 glasses of apéritif would not be very effective because of his size, so he sat at the bar and drank 1 glass after another. Only Jiang Hai and Paul Pierce were still calm. Jiang Hai estimated that it would be difficult for him to meet someone he liked, but Paul Pierce had met so many that he was already very calm. Sitting on the sofa, the two chatted intermittently. Before meeting Paul Pierce, Jiang Hai would think that this guy might be a very arrogant guy. Indeed, this guy was a good person in terms of style and speech. He was a very straightforward person. If he had something to say, he would say it directly. Sometimes, he would joke a little too much. But after all, he was a man in his 30s. He couldn't go too far. At most, he would joke that Jiang Hai was so busy every night that his waist couldn't hold up. So when he chatted with Jiang Hai, he still had a good time. The two chatted together. Unknowingly, the sky gradually darkened. Many people began to enter one after another. On this side, Avery Bradley and Isaiah Thomas gradually became serious. "Hey, Paul, we'll go down first." After looking up there for about 10 minutes, they should have found their respective targets, so after saying something to Paul Pierce, they hurriedly went down. "You're not going down?" After seeing the two go down, the other 4 did not move. Jiang Hai asked them with some surprise. Didn't they say that black people were very urgent in this regard? Why didn't they do anything? "Hey, what's the hurry? We're going down to reel in the net." Now that we're down, those girls are very calm. We have to drink with them and dance with them, and it's easy to be tricked. Let's wait a little longer. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Josh Smith said with a smile. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai could not help but secretly give him a thumbs up. It seemed that Josh Smith had received a lot of education when he was young. This was all experience. Sure enough, after another half an hour, Evan Turner, DeAndre Jordan, and Josh Smith went down together. After they went down, Paul Pierce also walked to the door of the box with Jiang Hai. "Take a look and see if there's anyone you like. If there's someone you like, then go straight to the topic. If there's no one you like, then drink here. I'm going down too." Looking at Jiang Hai, Paul Pierce said with a smile. "Oh, let me take a look." If it was in the past, Jiang Hai would probably refuse. Even when he went to New York with Moses Adams, he was actually quite resistant to these things. But now, he will not easily refuse. Men become bad when they have money. This sentence is actually not wrong. Hearing Paul Pierce's words, Jiang Hai also looked at the Buddha of Tiantan and did not refuse. Instead, he looked at the dance floor. Although Jiang Hai did not refuse, his vision would not be lowered because of this. If there was no one he liked on the dance floor, then he would not go down. After all, there were so many beautiful women waiting for him at home. As Jiang Hai glanced around, not long after, he saw a beautiful figure on the first floor. This figure did not look like a student. She was not on the dance floor, but sitting on the bar next to the dance floor. After Jiang Hai glanced at it, he smiled, then pointed at the figure. Wow, I advise you not to get involved with that woman. Seeing Jiang Hai pointing to the woman, Paul Pierce could not help but shake his head, and then looked at Jiang Hai with some pity. His eyes clearly said, "You are a nightclub newbie. Is there a problem?" Looking at Paul Pierce, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. That kind of woman is so eye-catching in the nightclub, but she doesn't have any men around her. This is not a novel. It's impossible for such a woman not to be targeted here. But now, friend, this means that there must be a bodyguard around her. Such a woman, we call her trouble. She's not a rich girl who will force you to marry her, she's the boss's woman, so you understand. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Paul Pierce also said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also curled his lips. It seemed that he had no interest in anything else. Then he shrugged. After watching Paul Pierce go downstairs, Jiang Hai sat at the bar and prepared to drink some wine by himself. Seeing that Jiang Hai did not go downstairs, the female bartender also stood up. Her job was to make drinks for Jiang Hai. Now that Jiang Hai did not go downstairs, it was naturally time for her to work. "Sir, what would you like to drink?" Looking at Jiang Hai, the female bartender asked indifferently. "Oh, I don't know much about these things. Just make whatever you want, but don't make it too strong. I have to drive back in a while. You know, my home is in Winthrop." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled and said very plainly, "Okay." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the female bartender also picked up a lot of bottles and glasses, as well as raw materials and the like, and began to mix. This was the first time that Jiang Hai watched someone mix a drink. To be exact, it was the first time that he watched someone mix a drink at such a close distance, so he also watched very carefully, but the movements of mixing a drink were limited. Unconsciously, Jiang Hai had watched it once and had no interest. As for men, unconsciously, his eyes glanced at the unbuttoned shirt of the female bartender. He didn't know if it was because it was hot here, after all, mixing a drink also required a lot of movements, or because she was used to it. The top 3 buttons of her shirt were unbuttoned. Jiang Hai hadn't noticed it before, but at this moment, not only could he see her collarbone, 2 indescribable things that were constantly moving due to the tremors, there was also that purplish-red vest. In addition, he also saw a tattoo on the inside of this woman's vest, whether it was in ancient times or modern times, whether it was in Huaxia or the United States, tattoos were very common now. In Huaxia, there were different kinds of things that were tattooed. But in the United States, tattoos were actually more of a pretense or a commemorative thing. It might not necessarily have any special meaning. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't pay too much attention to this tattoo. But suddenly, a flash of inspiration flashed in his mind, and he suddenly remembered the badge that he had been tracking down. It seems a bit like it. Seeing this constantly looming tattoo, Jiang Hai's eyes widened, and he subconsciously looked at the female bartender in front of him. Feeling Jiang Hai's gaze, the female bartender also smiled. Although her main job here was to mix drinks, if she could do something with the guests in these rooms, then she wouldn't refuse. Of course, the most important thing was that her purpose was different from the girls below. Those girls, as long as they were pleasing to the eye, then something indescribable would happen, and she had a purpose. Originally, after she came in and found Paul Pierce, she knew that today might just be a bartender. But she didn't expect that Jiang Hai would stay, and it seemed that he was very interested in her. "Sir," flaming hot lips, at this time, the wine in her hand was mixed and placed in front of Jiang Hai, and she said with a smile. "May I ask, where are you from?" Jiang Hai asked her after taking the wine glass she handed over. "Me? I'm from California." "Sir, you look like you should be Asian, Huaxia?" "Japan? Korea?" Looking at Jiang Hai, this person asked with a smile, and at the same time, she mixed the next glass of wine and kept shaking her private part. "Well, I'm Chinese." "You don't have to mix this cup anymore. can you go somewhere with me? Looking at the female bartender in front of him, Jiang Hai looked at her and asked. He was quite nervous about the pattern in his heart now. It was related to his golden finger. Oh. Gentlemen, in our line of work, if we go to other places to mix drinks, the price will be different. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the female bartender here couldn't help laughing, and her eyes were curved. At least her goal now is money. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.